Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Inherits Blue Inferno? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Two boys walked through the woods together, both around 4 years old. The taller one had blonde hair and red eyes, named Katsuki Bakugo. The smaller boy had green hair and green eyes, named Izuku Midoriya. Izuku walked with his head down, a distant look in his eyes. Bakugo had brought his friend out to play, hoping to distract him from his troubles. He knew that sitting at home with his mom wouldn't help. It had only been a few weeks since the tragic news. The hero knight's son had been killed in a battle with villains in the US. He was a prominent member of the international hero team, the Revengers, ranking third in the polls behind All Might and Star and Stripe. Most people didn't know that his real name was Hisashi Midoriya, and that his wife and son were Inko Midoriya and Izuku Midoriya. Bakugo recalled the day government officials visited Izuku's house. The boys had just returned from playing in the park when they overheard the man in the black suit delivering the heartbreaking news to Mrs. Midoriya. When Izuku heard it, he burst into tears. Bakugo's mom had taken him over to comfort the two. Uncharacteristically, she had been very concerned about her friend. Bakugo had shared her worry and managed to convince the moms to let him take Izuku to the park, believing it would be a great idea. Now, looking at his friend's face, he struggled to find the right words. As they emerged from the woods and entered the playground, he suddenly thought of something to say. He asked Izuku if he had gotten his quirk yet. This question pulled Izuku from his thoughts momentarily. He replied that he hadn't received it yet, but the doctor said it could happen any day now. He hoped it would be something cool like Bakugo's. Then, overwhelmed with emotion, he started to cry. Izuku fell to the ground, tears streaming silently down his face. Bakugo walked over to pat his friend on the head but quickly pulled his hand back, startled by how hot Izuku felt. The air around Izuku began to heat up, and his tears evaporated into steam. Suddenly his body erupted in blue fire, and his eyes glowed bright blue as flames shot into the sky. Bakugo stood in shock, wanting to help but unsure of what to do. His friend was engulfed in flames, reminiscent of a scene from an action anime. Just then, a deep voice interrupted his thoughts. A giant man with red hair and a red beard approached, built like a bodybuilder, wearing a serious expression. Bakugo thought he recognized the man but couldn't place him. The young boy rushed to the man, explaining the situation with a mix of panic and concern. He pleaded for help, asking the man to save his friend. The giant man introduced himself as Endeavor, stating that fire was his specialty and instructed Bakugo to stand back. Endeavor approached the blazing Izuku, recognizing him as Hisashi and Inko's son. He noticed Izuku's hair changing from teal green to dark blue before his eyes. The flames were spreading, and the wind was shifting dangerously. This needed to end quickly. Endeavor called out to Izuku, who looked up with panic. He warned his uncle to stay away, claiming he couldn't stop the fire. The situation was worsening, and Endeavor could see the flames were reminiscent of Hisashi's powers. He knew he had to act. He reassured Izuku that he could control the fire, encouraging him to embrace it rather than suppress it. He explained that while fire could be dangerous, it could also be a force for good if controlled. He urged Izuku to be a hero and put out the flames. The words sparked a determination within Izuku. He remembered his father, who had been a hero. As he calmed down and wiped his eyes, he took a deep breath and focused on the fire within him. He tried to push it down, but that only made it grow hotter. Endeavor advised him not to suppress his feelings but to let them go and visualize the fire extinguishing. Izuku struggled with a whirlwind of emotions: pain, grief, sadness, and anger, all fueling the flames. Yet, Endeavor's calm voice became his anchor amidst the storm. Suddenly, Izuku found himself in a vast white space, with only a small blue fire hovering before him. It transformed into the image of his father, who spoke to him with unmoving lips. Izuku was confused, having attended his father's funeral. How could he be standing before him? His father reassured him, expressing pride and urging him to stand up and be the hero he was meant to be. As Hisashi reached out, Izuku placed his tiny hand in his father's fingers, feeling a surge of energy. He stood up, and the white world faded away. Back in reality, with Endeavor in front of him and Bakugo behind, Izuku stood with his fire extinguished. The area around him bore signs of the fire, with several trees marked by burn scars, but all flames had been put out. Endeavor, familiar with flame control, was astonished by how quickly Izuku had extinguished such intense flames without any signs of injury. This was just like Hisashi. Bakugo rushed to his friend, relief flooding his voice as he asked if Izuku was all right. Endeavor observed the boys interact, knowing he needed to get Izuku to a doctor. He pulled out his phone and accessed Inko's contact information. The kind woman answered the phone, surprised to hear Endeavor on the other end. He explained the situation, and Inko felt a wave of worry wash over her. The flame hero urged her to act quickly and bring her husband's medical records. He provided the address of the nearest hospital and instructed her to meet him there. She agreed and hurried to follow his instructions. The two boys turned to the hero as he informed them that he had just called Izuku's mother, who would be meeting them at the hospital. Their reactions were distinctly different. The following day, Inko awoke in the hospital to the gentle voice of a nurse informing her that she would be taking his numbers. The doctor would soon come by to check on his progress. Inko approached the boy's bed, finding him still unconscious. She leaned down and kissed him on the forehead, speaking softly to him. She expressed her pride in him and urged him to return to her as soon as possible, encouraging him to be strong. Wiping away her tears, she went to the bathroom to freshen up, though she couldn't change her clothes. Still, she held on to the hope that they would be going home soon. However, the thought of Hisashi not being there when they returned crossed her mind, and she shook it off. Right now, her focus had to be on Izuku. All her other feelings would have to wait. Just then, her cell phone rang, displaying Rei Todoroki's name. Curious about what her friend wanted, she answered the call. They spoke for several minutes, with Rei asking about Izuku's condition. Inko informed her that there had been no change and that she didn't expect him to wake up for at least another 4 days. Rei understood, having been friends with Hisashi and knowing his background. Rei then extended an invitation for Inko and Izuku to stay with her family for the summer. Inko hesitated, feeling guilty about imposing on Rei and Enji, who already had 4 children to care for. However, Rei reassured her that they had discussed it with the kids, and everyone was on board. Inko felt a wave of guilt wash over her, realizing that Rei and Enji had known Hisashi long before she had. They considered him family, and she had been so consumed by her own grief that she had forgotten about their shared loss. With tears in her eyes, Inko finally agreed to the offer, and Rei informed her that they would be ready by the weekend. Enji had prepared the West Wing for them, and she hoped Izuku would be awake by then. After hanging up, Inko said a silent prayer, thanking Hisashi for watching over them and promising to take care of their son. 4 days passed, and Inko believed Izuku would wake up the next day. She had changed during this time, as the Bakugos had visited several times. On one of those visits, Mitsuki insisted on taking Inko home to shower and change while Katsuki and his father stayed behind to watch over Izuku. The waiting was taking a toll on young Bakugo, who felt helpless, unable to assist his friend. On the final day, he marched up to Izuku's bedside, took a deep breath, and shouted for him to wake up. His father was horrified by his language, reminding him that this was a hospital and that Izuku needed his rest. Bakugo insisted that Izuku needed to get up so they could compete, declaring that he would be the #1 hero, even greater than All Might. At that moment, Izuku's eyes fluttered open, and he asked if Bakugo really thought his quirk was awesome. Masaru fell back in his chair, quickly getting to his feet to call for the doctors. He also called his wife with the good news, and both women rushed back to the hospital, filled with joy. Upon their arrival, the nurses hurried Inko to Izuku's room, while the Bakugo boys waited in the lobby. Mitsuki stayed behind with them. Inko entered the room and saw her little boy awake and alert. His eyes had changed to the same shade as Hisashi's, bringing tears to her eyes. Izuku asked if everything was all right, and Inko assured him that she was just happy to see him. He remarked that she looked like she had seen a ghost, to which she replied that in a way, she had, as he now resembled his father. He asked to see his reflection, and after looking in the mirror for a long time, he expressed concern about whether she was mad at him for nearly burning down the park. Inko gently reminded him to be careful from now on, and he nodded in understanding. Curiosity got the better of Izuku, and he asked if he could still be a hero with his new power. Inko encouraged him, believing he would be an even greater hero than Hisashi had been. Izuku shared the vision he had during the park incident, recalling the encouraging words his father had given him that helped him find the strength to put out the fire. Inko's eyes filled with tears again, realizing that Hisashi was still with them in spirit. Just then, the doctor cleared his throat, and Inko turned to him, eager for news. The doctor informed her that Izuku was very healthy and that his power had caused no harm to his body. Inko inquired about the changes in his hair and eyes, and the doctor reassured her that while they were concerned, they found nothing harmful. The only change noted was that Izuku's temperature was slightly elevated, likely due to his fire-based power. Inko reflected on how Hisashi had been the same way, recalling the warmth of being held by him on cold winter days. She always found it so comforting. The doctor explained that they would be keeping her son for one more night to ensure he was all right. The following morning, the doctors conducted their final tests and were surprised by the findings. The doctor then brought both mother and child to a standard exam room to deliver the news. The doctor stated that the wait was over and confirmed that, as expected, her son had a fire-based power. He could emit a large amount of heat and light simultaneously and appeared to be completely immune to fire and heat. There was also evidence suggesting he could absorb fire, although the extent of this ability was still unclear. The doctor speculated that this was how he had extinguished the fire he created in the park. The mother noted that this power was very similar to her husband's, except for the absorption aspect, which her husband could not do. The doctor asked her about her own power, and she demonstrated her ability to move small objects toward her. She handed a lollipop to her son, who eagerly unwrapped it and placed it in his mouth. The doctor explained that it was common for children to inherit a stronger version of their parents' quirks or a combination of both. It seemed her son fell into the first category, and they had decided to call his power Inferno. She then asked the doctor if her son would be all right and when they could go home. The doctor reassured her that the boy would be fine, as his power had stabilized, posing no threat to himself or others. However, he provided her with the name and number of a court counselor and recommended setting up an appointment soon. Afterward, Inko filled out the necessary paperwork, which felt like it took forever. Once completed, they hopped into a cab and drove back to their home, a normal two-story house down the street from the Bakugos. The house had large windows facing the rising sun, with a living room, kitchen, and guest restroom downstairs, and bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs. Inko sat down with Izuku and explained that his power was similar to his father's, which made him happy. However, she also mentioned that it had taken his father many years to learn to control his abilities. While his father could not teach him now, his uncle Enji and Aunt Rei had offered for them to stay with them for the summer, and Enji had even offered to train him. Izuku was excited at the prospect of training with Enji, who was known as the hero Endeavor, one of the best heroes in the country. His hands ignited with flames at his excitement, but he quickly extinguished them before anything could catch fire. He agreed to the plan as long as it was all right with his mother. The next evening, Inko called the Bakugos to share the news. Mitsuki was dealing with a persistent Katsuki, who eventually was told to leave. Inko informed Mitsuki that they would be staying with friends for the next 2 months to help train Izuku in his new fire abilities. Katsuki overheard this and declared that if Izuku was training, he would train even harder. Inko laughed at Katsuki's passionate outburst, relieved to see he was back to his usual self. Mitsuki wished her well and asked her to keep in touch. The mother and son took a train toward the Todoroki mansion. Upon arriving, they were met by a driver in a dark limousine, who drove them to the estate. They were awestruck by its size, feeling as though their apartment was tiny in comparison. Rei and Enji greeted them at the front door, along with the 4 Todoroki children, who were a mix of eager and nervous. Enji and Rei gave the Midoriyas a tour of the house, leading them to the west wing. Enji pointed out that everything was lined with high-grade fire retardant and assured Inko that it was safe and would not affect their health. He also mentioned that the house was equipped with water and chemical fire extinguishers, just in case. Inko felt reassured by this information. Enji then turned to Izuku and asked if he was ready to start training. The little boy was practically bouncing with joy, causing his hair to ignite with flames. Several embers landed on the mats but extinguished quickly. Seeing this made Inko feel more confident. Enji confirmed that they could start right away and turned to Inko for her approval, which she gladly gave. Enji noted that Tuya and Shoka should already be training and led the way. Izuku followed him with a big smile on his face. Inko smiled, reflecting on how long it had been since she had seen her son so happy. Hisashi's death had been difficult for Izuku, and while she was unsure about his vision of Hisashi, she believed that if there was a way for him to communicate from beyond, he would find it. She saw the same spirit in Izuku and vowed to ensure he became as good a man and hero as his father had been. Meanwhile, in a distant city, a group of figures gathered. One of them inquired about any heroes like Night Sun appearing since his death. A man with a glowing scar expressed his frustration that no one had emerged, stating that he had expected Night Sun to be a tougher opponent. A feminine voice cautioned that their reckless actions could have compromised their long-term plans for the world. Another voice acknowledged the risks but noted that their scared brother's actions had been effective in keeping the Revengers off their trail. If they had continued their pursuit, they would have also been exposed. There was a more effective way to deal with him, a quieter method. That was a foolish comment. Everyone knew how powerful KS was. That was the only way to handle him. At least his death wasn't public. Additionally, the Revengers were taken out too, so good job, brother. Thank you, brother. Now, on to different business. What do we think of this man calling himself All for One? The self-proclaimed Demon Lord. Should we consider bringing him in? He could be useful. No way, brother. That one can't be trusted. He dreams beyond his station. He may aspire to be a ruler, but he is just a savage. For once, there was agreement. However, it was believed he could be useful. His schemes might make their goals easier to reach. But for now, they should only observe. To do more would draw unwanted attention after the death of Night Sun. Agreed. No punishment will be given for the method of Night Sun's death. It served their purpose. What about the cleanup? An oily voice spoke now. It went well. Much new information was gleaned. Excellent. Let us watch the events as we always have, and always shall. 11 years passed in the blink of an eye. Izuku grew into a powerful young man. Through his training, it was discovered that he had been born with a combination quirk. He inherited his father's firepower and a version of his mother's quirk. Izuku's variant of telekinesis allowed him to control his own body, enabling him to fly without relying solely on his fire. Consequently, they had to update his quirk registration forms, and his quirk's name changed from Inferno to Fire Flight. At this point, he could move freely and quickly but was still no match for Endeavor's speed. While Izuku admired All Might, he found his main inspiration in his father. He spent most of his time watching the few clips of his father rather than the All Might rescue clip. He developed his current fighting style from his father, focusing on fireball attacks of varying sizes. He also had an area of effect attack that unleashed a burst of fiery heat, knocking everyone off their feet. Additionally, he incorporated other fire constructs into his style from observing other heroes. He remained a hero fanboy, but it was more about emulation than longing. In appearance, Izuku had blue hair and blue eyes. His body was lean and fit, a result of training with Endeavor and his own efforts. One downside was that he was still rather short at 5 feet 5 inches. His personality was far more outgoing and energetic since he did not have to endure the scorn of being powerless. However, he remained selfless to the point of recklessness, a fact that worried those close to him. Because of his powerful quirk, Inko never gained weight out of guilt. She was closer to her son and encouraged him in his heroic pursuits. Izuku's training with Tuya and Shoka under Endeavor made him close with the family from that point on. He thought of the Todoroki siblings as his own, especially Tuya, whom he often called Big Bro. As for Bakugo, in a normal timeline, he would have become arrogant because of his explosion quirk. That did not happen here. He was cocky and quick to anger but not cruel. He and Izuku quickly became friends and rivals due to Izuku's powerful quirk. The two trained together often, growing stronger because of it. Bakugo developed his signature howitzer impact and explosive flight sooner due to Izuku's influence. He also took to calling him Firefly because of his fire and flight powers and his small size. Now onward and upward. Izuku ran down the street on a bright sunny day, his muscular legs propelling him forward. He was on his way to school when he was stopped by a villain attack. A giant villain was being apprehended by heroes. The reasons for the villain's actions were unknown, but the crowd was annoyed at the delay. Izuku watched the action, pulling out his trusty notebook to take notes. He was excited at the sight of the hero, Kamui Woods, who was new but making a big name for himself. He went into a rant about how impressive his power was, noting how he could apply his moves to his own abilities. He wondered if he could use his power to create flaming ropes to bind villains. An old man with star growths on his head smirked and commented that Izuku was a real fanboy. He guessed that Izuku wanted to be a hero too. Izuku replied with a smile, stating that he not only wanted to be a hero but would be the best. Eventually, Izuku arrived at school. The day unfolded like any other school day until the last PRD arrived. A white-haired teacher stood in front of the class with a stack of papers in his hand. He announced that he should hand out a career aptitude test for the students to pick their professions. Instead, he threw the papers into the air, declaring that he knew they all wanted to pursue the hero track. The whole class proceeded to show off their quirks. Yes, they had some impressive quirks, but there was no power usage allowed at school. Bakugo, sitting in the front of the room with his feet on the desk, leaned back and proclaimed that he would be the #1 hero while the others would be lucky to be sidekicks to some lesser hero. The class grew angry at Bakugo, yelling and screaming at him for his comments but making no move toward him. Izuku spoke up, advising Bakugo to take a chill pill. He warned that if Bakugo kept talking like that, he was more likely to become a villain than a hero. The teacher intervened, noting that both Midoriya and Bakugo had applied to take the UA entrance exam. The class fell silent, stunned. Several commented on UA's low acceptance rate, doubting they would get in. Bakugo shouted that he and Firefly would get in, relishing the thought of becoming a greater and richer hero than All Might. Izuku countered that he would be the #1 hero instead. The PRD ended, and Izuku began organizing his notes from the earlier battle. Suddenly, Bakugo walked over and knocked on Izuku's desk. He asked if Izuku wanted to join him and the others at the arcade. Izuku replied that he couldn't today because he had to meet someone. Bakugo expressed his confusion about Izuku's interest in that girl. Bakugo and Izuku's friend with the stretchy fingers approached, followed by another boy who smirked as he asked if that girl was the one he had seen with Izuku around the neighborhood. Izuku confirmed it, and the boy made a gesture that implied admiration, questioning what a girl like that was doing with someone like Izuku. Having heard this kind of talk before, Izuku remained unfazed and suggested the boy should ask her instead. The boy claimed he could never talk to someone as attractive as her, prompting Bakugo to smirk and point out that was likely why she was Izuku's girlfriend and not his. The boy was shocked to learn that Izuku was dating her and asked how that was possible. Izuku stood up, placing his notebook in his bag, and explained that he didn't have a clear answer. He stepped closer to the boy, a blue fireball igniting between his finger and the boy's face, suggesting he should be careful with his words and gestures when discussing someone's girlfriend. The boy raised his hands in surrender, apologizing for his comments. Izuku extinguished the fireball and warned him not to let it happen again. Bakugo then ordered his friends to leave, and they complied, albeit dejectedly. Izuku looked at Bakugo with disappointment, who apologized for his friend's behavior and promised to talk to them later. Izuku thanked him and they exchanged a fist bump before Bakugo told him to say hello to his girlfriend for him. Knowing he needed to hurry, Izuku glanced at the time, aware that his girlfriend did not like being kept waiting. Meanwhile, a criminal had just robbed a nearby store and was trying to escape with the money. However, an athletic man in the crowd transformed into an imposing figure, declaring he was there to help. Izuku dashed to a nearby alley where he was supposed to meet his girlfriend. He had changed out of his school uniform into a white button-down shirt, black pants, and dress shoes, wanting to look presentable for her. As he approached, he spotted her back. She was tall, nearly 5 feet 11 inches, with short snow-white hair, and he knew there was a streak of red hair framing her face. She was dressed formally in a simple sleeveless gray dress and black shoes, exuding class. When she turned at the sound of her name, Izuku noted her striking appearance, including the red streak of hair tucked behind her ear. Despite the height difference, with her towering over him, Izuku felt nothing but joy at being with her. She greeted him with a cool demeanor, noting he was late. Though her expression was impassive, Izuku could sense her disappointment. He acknowledged that he was only a few seconds late, but she insisted that late was still late. Inside, she was amused by his appearance, thinking how cute he looked, but she reminded herself to maintain her stern facade. Izuku sensed something was off and asked what was wrong. She confronted him about turning down her father's and brother's offers to recommend him to UA. Izuku rubbed the back of his head, realizing she had overheard their conversation. She had been at her father's agency when he met with them and had listened from outside the door. He acknowledged her point and explained that he hadn't planned to keep it from her. As her voice rose in volume, he could see her irritation, but he also recognized that she wasn't truly angry. If she had been, her eyes would have given her away. He attempted to explain that he was sorry for not telling her sooner, but he had anticipated her reaction. She would have called him foolish for rejecting the opportunity. He mentioned that he and Bakugo had discussed it and agreed on wanting to get into UA based on their own merits. Her response was sharp, questioning if he thought she couldn't get in without her family's influence. Izuku quickly clarified that no one could compete with her abilities, but he pointed out the implications of her family's status. If they didn't recommend her, it might appear as though they didn't care. He and Bakugo, not being family, would face scrutiny if they did the same. Though she understood his reasoning, Shoka could tell he was hiding something deeper. She recognized the tone in his voice, indicating there was more to the story. Now what was the real reason? Or had he abandoned his dream of going to UA and becoming the #1 hero? The girl was perceptive, and Izuku figured he should just tell her the truth, even though he knew she might not fully understand. As his girlfriend, she deserved honesty, even if she didn't support his decision. He took a deep breath and leaned against the alley wall, hanging his head low. The truth was that it didn't feel right to accept recommendations from Uncle Enji or Big Brother Tuya. If someone was going to give him a recommendation, it should have been his dad. Shoka's icy stare softened slightly. She walked over and placed her hand gently on Izuku's shoulder, knowing how hard losing his father had been. Most days he managed well, but moments like this hit him hard. "I'm sorry about your father, Aizu, but I believe he would encourage you to take the recommendations if he were here. He would want you to pursue your dream, just like I do." Izuku lifted his head and wiped away tears. He understood her point. "I know, but my dad got in without one. I want to prove I'm just as good as him. If I don't, how can I become a greater hero than he was?" Shoka shook her head, knowing there was no convincing him now. He had made up his mind. She recalled a time when they were 7, during a sleepover at his house. She had gotten up to go to the bathroom and heard a noise coming from the office. Peeking in, she saw Izuku watching an old clip of Night Sun taking down a group of villains and saving a town. It was one of the few clips that showcased his father in action. After it ended, Izuku watched it again, constantly comparing himself to his dad, which she knew could hurt his chances of getting into UA. But she understood it was about being close to his father, and while she didn't like it, she couldn't take that away from him. "Fine," she finally said. "Does that mean our date is cancelled?" "Absolutely not. You are coming on this date whether you like it or not." Izuku pulled her closer, smiling. He couldn't imagine anyone not enjoying a date with the most amazing girl in the world. Shoka felt a rush of warmth at his words. How did he know just what to say? She took a deep breath to steady herself. "I'm pretty amazing. However, there will not be any more dates for the next 10 months. 10 months? Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief. "That is your punishment for not being honest with me." "Really? I don't agree with your reasoning at all. If you had just told me the truth, a punishment wouldn't be necessary. But you lied. 10 months. That's how long you have to prepare for the entrance exam. I would just be a distraction." You are an amazing distraction. Shoka wanted to melt at that compliment but steeled herself. Anyway, you will call me every 2 days with an update. And make sure you study and sleep, not just train. Yes, ma'am. Shoka nodded, knowing it would be hard to be apart from him for so long, but it was for the best. After all, she had her own preparations to make, and Izuku could be just as much of a distraction as she could. Don't worry, Shoka. I will get in. I promise. You'd better. Or else. Izuku recognized the look in her eye. When she said, or else, it didn't bode well. His girlfriend could be quite intimidating when she wanted to be. He simply nodded, feeling it was the best response. But now where are you taking me? It's a little family restaurant that has some of the best soba in town. A good start. And for dessert, they also have incredible cheesecake. But if the soba is good enough, you might just earn a goodnight kiss. Challenge accepted. Izuku extended his hand to her, and she nodded, linking her arm with his as he led her toward the restaurant. As they walked arm in arm, they attracted some curious glances from passers-by. They were an unusual couple, with Shoka appearing older than her 14 years due to her height and build, while Izuku was 5 inches shorter. Shoka didn't mind the stares. These people only saw Izuku's exterior, they didn't know the amazing person he was. He was one of the first outside her family to tell her she was pretty, making her feel beautiful when she felt awkward. His dedication to becoming a hero was admirable, even if it sometimes meant sacrificing sleep to train. To her, Izuku was the greatest boy ever, and that was coming from someone who didn't usually think much of gender. Suddenly, their path was blocked by 3 older boys, all large and muscular. Hey there, beautiful. What's a classy girl like you doing with a short fry like him? Why don't you come have fun with some real men? Izuku instinctively moved between Shoka and the boys, displaying his bravery. The lady is with me, he stated firmly. Get lost, shorty. She's too much woman for you. Oh really? Izuku rolled up his right sleeve, a surge of concern rushing through Shoka. She knew he would be fine, but she worried he might use his power, which was against the law. Shoka, can I get a piece of blue ice? That better be something to treat the serious situation we're about to face. Shoka understood his clever tactic. She held out her hand, and ice formed perfectly clear and blue, as vibrant as the midday sky. She shaped the ice into a tube about 2 inches in diameter and 7 inches long. With a cold and measured voice, she explained that blue ice was the hardest naturally forming variant of ice in the world, sturdier than concrete in most cases. She held up the blue ice before her, noting that this version was much stronger than normal because she had made it with her quirk, giving it a strength equal to steel. The tall girl placed the ice in her companion's hand, and he held it out for the whole street to see. Izuku gripped the ice and flexed mildly, showcasing the muscles of his exposed forearm. After a moment, the ice began to fracture, and within a minute, it broke apart, the pieces falling to the ground with a solid thud. One bystander dismissed it as a trick, doubting his strength. Izuku cracked his knuckles, challenging anyone who thought otherwise. The 2 men looked into his eyes and saw no fear, only a bright light that gave him an intimidating presence. They decided it was wiser to find easier targets and quickly walked away. The crowd of onlookers stared at Izuku for a moment before he threw them a side glare, prompting them to lower their heads and move on. The girl complimented him on his cleverness, noting that he had never intended to use his quirk. Izuku rolled his sleeve back down, mentioning that it was against the law and that he wouldn't want to ruin her nice evening by having burned sleeves while they were eating. She agreed, adding that it would have been inappropriate, but it would have made the evening more enjoyable to see his arms. As they continued, a large explosion erupted nearby, and Shoka turned to see smoke rising. She wondered what it could be, suspecting a villain attack. Izuku's voice was harsh and determined as he insisted they needed to get over there. Seeing the dread on his face, Shoka asked what was wrong. He explained that the explosion belonged to Kanchan. Taking her hand, he pulled her along, and although she struggled for a moment, her long legs quickly caught up. She was thankful for her choice of flats that day. She questioned how he could be sure it was Bakugo, but Izuku explained that the sound and color of the explosion were distinctive. Kanchan's explosions had a loud sizzle and a bright orange hue. Although she wanted to ask why they were running toward the explosion, she held back. Izuku was a born hero, always rushing toward danger, and she would follow to keep him from doing something reckless. Moments later, they arrived at a scene of devastation. Many pro-heroes were already there, keeping the crowd back and rescuing people from nearby buildings that had caught fire. As they worked their way closer, they saw a villain with a liquid body holding a boy captive. The boy was shouting angrily, and Izuku recognized him immediately as Bakugo. They knew they had to act quickly. If the situation continued, Kanchan could be in serious danger. The villain was blocking Bakugo from breathing. Izuku felt the urgency, but Shoka reminded him that they weren't allowed to use their powers without hero licenses. Izuku acknowledged her point but felt the need to do something. Shoka proposed a plan, stating that her quirk could free Bakugo, and then Izuku could fly them to safety. She suggested that Izuku create a distraction by absorbing the fire around them, allowing her to get in close. With determination, they broke through the line established by the heroes, running into the alley despite the shouts for them to stop. Unbeknownst to them, a skinny man at the back of the crowd wanted to help but felt powerless until a young blonde girl with glasses approached him, asking to assist. The man nodded and quickly laid out a plan. Meanwhile, Izuku entered the scene, fully visible to the villain. The villain taunted him, but Izuku activated his power, his blue eyes glowing brightly. He began to absorb the fire from the surrounding buildings, drawing the heat, light, and embers toward him. The flames gathered around his arms, causing the sleeves of his shirt to vaporize as the fire disappeared into his skin. The surrounding fires extinguished, leaving the onlookers in awe. The villain, impressed by the display, began to reconsider his target. At that moment, Shoka struck, freezing the goo around Bakugo. She delivered powerful strikes to the ice, freeing him just as he gasped for air. Izuku rushed over, and together they grabbed Bakugo, hauling him toward the alley entrance. Unfortunately, the villain recovered and leapt to attack them. Izuku prepared to fly his friends to safety, wrapping an arm around each of them just as a powerful gust erupted from the alley, sending them flying into a soggy patch of grass. Both Bakugo and Shoka landed in the mud, and suddenly, it started to rain. It took a moment for them to untangle themselves and get to their feet. A hero approached to check on them, guiding them to a nearby ambulance for evaluation. As the rain cleared, a large figure emerged from the alley. All Might, the #1 hero, stood proudly in a classic superhero pose. His giant smile was bright for everyone to see. He assured the citizens that they had nothing to fear because he was there. The crowd cheered at the sight of the #1 hero, marveling at how he could change the weather with a single punch. A short while later, All Might was still surrounded by the media, who eagerly captured every moment of the #1 hero. The police had apprehended the Sludge villain and placed him in a containment pod, preparing to transport him to prison. The teens had been checked out and confirmed to be fine. As the heroes and officers were about to reprimand Izuku and Shoka for using their quirks without a license, Shoka mentioned her connection to the #2 hero, which caught their attention. She also informed them that Izuku had been specially trained by Endeavor and was applying to UA. The officers and heroes were impressed, praising the teens and expressing their excitement about their potential as future heroes. Then there was Bakugo. The young man received commendations from the heroes for his bravery. They praised the power of his quirk and many offered to have him as a sidekick after he graduated from a hero program. However, instead of feeling flattered, Bakugo felt frustrated. He believed he hadn't done anything worthy of praise. He had been captured like an extra while his friends had acted heroically. He vowed to himself that he would never feel helpless again and would become #1, no matter what. Meanwhile, the sullen youth knew he had to confront Shoka, even though he disliked the idea more than being captured by a villain. He approached her, asserting that he hadn't needed her help. Shoka, unimpressed, pointed out that it hadn't looked that way. Bakugo insisted she let him finish, expressing his gratitude in a raspy voice. Shoka was taken aback, though she kept her expression neutral. She thought it was a surprise to hear Bakugo thank her, but she decided to let it go, knowing he had been through enough that day. With tears in his eyes, Bakugo turned to Izuku, vowing never to be helpless again. Izuku smiled and acknowledged his friend's determination. They exchanged a fist bump, solidifying their bond before Bakugo said his goodbyes and headed home. Shoka brushed off her dress, trying to remove the dirt with little success. She took out her phone and began typing. Izuku looked at her curiously, wondering what she was doing. She explained that she was messaging Auntie Inko to let her know she was coming over to change. Izuku realized he looked quite disheveled and nodded in agreement. Shoka clarified that she was going to clean up while he was tasked with picking up a takeout order from the restaurant. After sending her message, Izuku's phone chimed with a notification. He checked it and saw that she had also asked his mom if she wanted anything, to which the answer was yes. Suddenly, it dawned on him that he had to go to the restaurant looking like this. Shoka reminded him of his promise to deliver great soba, playfully suggesting he wouldn't want to disappoint her. Izuku grumbled about looking like a road worker on his way to a concert, but Shoka smiled, assuring him he would figure something out since he had earned her good graces. Nearby, a young girl had left the scene earlier. She had watched two kids her age rush in to save their friend and found them incredible. She hoped to do something for them someday. Glancing at her phone, she realized time was slipping away. She hurried toward the restaurant she had intended to visit. When Izuku arrived at the restaurant, he noticed everyone staring at him. The man at the front counter hesitated to serve him until a girl his age spoke up, defending him as one of the kids who had saved someone during the villain attack. She had long periwinkle hair that framed her face, and her red eyes sparkled with a unique charm. Izuku thought she was very pretty, though not more so than his girlfriend. The manager, initially skeptical, eventually relented after more patrons praised Izuku for his bravery. The gruff chef agreed to serve him but insisted he change clothes afterward. Izuku readily agreed and turned to the girl, thanking her for her support. She introduced herself as Aizawa, explaining that she had come to the area to try the cheesecake, which she had heard was exceptional. As they chatted while Izuku's order was prepared, he shared stories about his girlfriend, and Eri admired his loyalty, thinking how lucky his girlfriend was. When the owner brought out Izuku's food, he kindly reminded him to wear proper clothes on his next visit. Izuku bowed repeatedly in gratitude, thanking the man for his understanding. He said goodbye to Eri and hurried out the door. Eri remained at the table for a moment, replaying the scene of the villain attack in her mind. Midoriya's body had glowed blue when he absorbed the fire, indicating he was likely a fire user. She recalled her dad mentioning a hero who wielded blue flames and wondered if there was a connection. Regardless, the blue boy would still make a great hero, and if she was going to be sharing space with him, she needed to improve. Within 15 minutes, the hurried teen arrived home, pausing by the front door with a worried expression. Unlike most boys, Izuku didn't have to worry about his mother disliking his girlfriend. Inko adored Shoka. However, this created a different concern for him. He feared they might team up against him. Though it hadn't happened yet, he often wondered what it would be like if they did. Perhaps he was overthinking it, but he couldn't shake the feeling. He inserted his key into the door and turned the handle, hearing the two of them talking inside. He entered hesitantly, holding his bag of food in front of him like a makeshift shield. Both Shoka and Inko noticed his arrival and seemed genuinely happy. Inko rushed over to her son, exclaiming how proud she was of him. She enveloped him in a tight hug, leaving him momentarily bewildered. Fortunately, the food remained unharmed. Inko continued, expressing her excitement about his recent adventure, mentioning how he had extinguished a fire and rescued Bakugo from a villain. She found it impressive. Izuku, surprised by his mother's enthusiasm, handed over the food and whispered something in her ear. She nodded in agreement and headed to the kitchen to plate the meal. Meanwhile, Izuku walked over to the couch where Shoka was sitting. She had changed into a simple blue t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, her usual attire. She preferred pants over skirts and dresses, feeling more comfortable that way. Izuku suspected it was also because she was a bit self-conscious about showing off her long athletic legs. She only wore dresses when they went out together, and while he appreciated her dressing up, he liked her in anything. He asked if they were good, and she confirmed they were. Her eyes sparkled with joy, indicating she meant it. He then inquired if that meant he was out of the doghouse. Shoka picked up her phone and hit a few buttons, announcing she had decided to amend his punishment. Izuku's phone chimed, and he opened a message from Shoka that included an attachment. He felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension as he opened it, his eyes widening at the sight of the document. It was a detailed training schedule, complete with workout times, meal plans, and even scheduled breaks. He noticed parts highlighted in red and asked what RWS stood for. With a twinkle of humor in her eyes, Shoka explained it stood for Rest with Shoka. Several thoughts raced through Izuku's mind, most of which he deemed too personal to share. He requested more information, and Shoka revealed that after discussing with Auntie Inko, they agreed he couldn't be trusted to rest on his own. He would likely push himself too hard. She reminded him of the time he dislocated his arm during training, emphasizing the importance of rest. Izuku acknowledged her point, admitting it was hard for him to take breaks. Shoka reassured him that she had scheduled their rest days to ensure he actually got the recovery he needed. He conceded that seeing her 1 day a week for 10 months was better than not seeing her at all and apologized for not being truthful earlier. Shoka accepted his apology, reminding him not to let it happen again. They exchanged smiles, the argument behind them, and peace restored. Shoka stood up and kissed him on the head, playfully telling him to go change and throw away his shirt. Over the next 10 months, Izuku and Bakugo committed to following Endeavor's rigorous training schedule. The training was intense, but both saw significant improvements. They engaged in combat training together twice a week and dedicated another 2 days to individual workouts. On weekends, they took the time to rest. Shoka kept her promise to ensure Izuku was getting enough rest and staying on top of his studies, which he was. Izuku was an excellent student. One weekend, the couple decided to catch a movie and enjoy some ice cream. Shoka chose a cheesy romantic comedy. Although Izuku wasn't fond of such films, he knew Shoka enjoyed them, so he agreed to go. Throughout the movie, he found himself captivated by his girlfriend. She looked stunning that day, wearing a simple white sleeveless blouse paired with a dark blue skirt. Her long athletic legs were elegantly displayed, and Izuku couldn't help but admire her. The movie faded into the background as he focused on her. After the film, they stopped for ice cream mint chocolate chip for Izuku and cookies and cream for Shoka. Suddenly, Shoka turned to him with a question. "How did you like the movie?" she asked. Izuku inhaled sharply, causing a chunk of ice cream to get stuck in his throat, and he coughed lightly to clear it. He replied, "It was great," though it came out more like a question than a statement. "Really? What did you like about it?" Shoka pressed. Izuku pondered his response but noticed the playful glint in her eyes. "You know, I wasn't really watching the movie." Her expression remained neutral. "Do I?" "Don't be smug, Shoka." "Okay, let's say I do know that. What were you watching then?" "You know that too." "I do. But I still want to hear you say it." "I was watching you." Shoka's eyes sparkled like festive lights. "Do you want me to elaborate?" "Not in public." Her tone was flat, but Izuku understood she was being straightforward. "Besides, like you said, I know what you were looking at. I wonder if you dress so cute on dates to get your way. Or, what if I dress this way because I want to impress you?" "How so?" "Well, take today for example. I really wanted to see this movie, knowing you aren't a fan of it. So, I wore a skirt that shows off my legs, ensuring we both had a good time today." She took another bite of her ice cream. Izuku nodded. "Just so you know, I would have gone to the movie with you anyway. But would you have enjoyed it if I wore baggy jeans and a sweatshirt?" "Well, you'd still be a sight to behold, but probably not as much." "Exactly. This way, we both got what we wanted from the date, not to mention the ice cream." Izuku shook his head, amused. Shoka was logical yet undeniably charming, using her appeal to her advantage. "You know what?" he said. "What?" "You're a lot of fun." "Of course I am." The two teens laughed as they continued walking, discussing their lives. Izuku shared updates about his training, while Shoka revealed her upcoming UA recommendation trials and interview, expressing her nerves. Izuku reassured her that she had nothing to worry about, but she remained anxious. As they walked back to the Midoriya home, They passed Takoba Municipal Beach Park and were surprised by what they saw. On the beach stood a young girl with long blonde hair, aqua eyes, and fair skin. She was crushing garbage into solid cubes, some as large as refrigerators, and then hauling them off the beach. A tall, athletic man with blonde hair, dressed in a blue tracksuit, was shouting through a loudspeaker, urging the girl to work faster. Curious about the unusual scene, the teens watched until Izuku recognized the girl as she turned to face them. "Melissa," he exclaimed, astonished. The girl turned and smiled, waving at him. "Izuku." Melissa spoke to the man, who looked at the two teens with surprise. After a brief exchange, he set down the loudspeaker, and she ran over to them, breathing heavily as she stopped. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I live nearby," Izuku explained, pointing to the right. "Shoka and I were just heading back." Melissa looked up at Shoka. "So, you're Shoka?" Izuku was right. "You really are beautiful. I didn't expect you to be so tall, though." Shoka felt a rush of surprise. She had never been called beautiful by another girl, aside from her mom and sister. Most girls her age were either jealous of her looks, envious of her quirk, or thought she was a spoiled rich kid. And the boys? They were often the worst. Keeping her expression neutral, Shoka replied, "I'm Shoka. Nice to meet you, Melissa. How do you know Izuku?" Melissa laughed. "Aizu? Is that your pet name for him?" "Yes. Is that a problem?" "No, I think it's cute. Anyway, how I met Izuku is an interesting story." As Melissa began to recount the events of their first meeting, her mind drifted back to that pivotal day 6 years ago. At that time, 8-year-old Melissa lived with her father on Island. Her father was the renowned David Shield, a Nobel Prize winner for his research into quirks. He had made a fortune creating support devices and costumes to help heroes utilize their powers more effectively. Melissa found it strange that a man who dedicated his life to studying quirks had a daughter without one. It had been nearly 3 years since she received that news, and it had been difficult to accept. Some friends had distanced themselves from her, fearing they might catch her quirklessness. Although that phase had passed, it still hadn't been easy. Melissa had always dreamed of becoming a pro hero, like many kids. However, she had a particular hero in mind: All Might, the greatest hero in the world and a symbol of peace. She had grown up calling him Uncle Might. Melissa understood that being quirkless meant her dream of becoming a pro hero was unlikely to come true. The girl found herself in a haze, uncertain of what to do. She still wanted to save people but had no idea how to go about it. On this particular day, she was at her father's lab for Take Your Kid to Work Day. The morning had been spent watching him run data on a new device, which had been quite boring for her. However, they soon moved to his examination room, filled with scanners and machines used to study quirks. Curious, Melissa asked her father why they were there. He explained that he had an appointment with Japan's #2 hero, Endeavor. When she inquired about the hero's problems, her father clarified that the appointment was not for Endeavor himself. With a smile, her father assured her that she would see soon enough. A short while later, the door opened, and a giant man entered, wearing a dark blue costume adorned with fiery accents. His beard and shoulders flickered with flames. Endeavor greeted her father, thanking him for the meeting. He then stepped aside to reveal a small boy with blue hair and eyes, dressed in a sleeveless shirt and shorts. The boy looked around with wonder, asking if this was the place his uncle had mentioned. Endeavor reminded the boy to call him by his hero name while in uniform. The small boy then looked at David Shield and Melissa, concern evident on his face. David knelt down to introduce himself, expressing his excitement about meeting Izuku Midoriya, who had been mentioned by his uncle. Izuku hoped the information shared had been positive. David assured him it was, noting that Izuku's quirk was among the most impressive he had ever heard of. When he asked if Izuku could absorb fire and heat, the boy confirmed that he could. Impressed, David requested to take some scans and gather more information. Izuku agreed, and after a brief introduction to Melissa, they prepared for a demonstration of his powers. Endeavor instructed Izuku to perform as they had practiced, and the boy took a deep breath, summoning blue flames that danced in his hands. He formed the fire into a hovering ball that illuminated the room with a bright blue glow. Melissa watched in awe, marveling at the display. She asked if he could fully control the fire, to which Izuku replied that he was still learning. David noted the unique dark color of the flames, which prompted him to take measurements. As he pressed buttons on the control console, small probes emerged to scan the fireball, revealing surprising results. David commented on the unexpected heat and solidity of the flames, while Endeavor explained that similar results had been observed in Izuku's father. David recalled the information Endeavor had shared, confirming the findings. Next, David expressed his desire to see Izuku's fire absorption ability. The boy raised his arms, and the fireball transformed into a ribbon that flowed into his skin and vanished. David was impressed, noting that the files indicated Izuku's father could not absorb fire. Endeavor confirmed this, explaining that while his father had exceptional fire control, he lacked the absorption ability. David then prepared to conduct body scans, placing Izuku in a large whole-body scanner. As the device began its process, Melissa took a seat nearby, eager to observe. During the scan, the children engaged in conversation. Izuku remained still, accustomed to the procedure, but felt comfortable enough to chat. He asked Melissa what she preferred to be called, leading to a brief discussion about names and cultural differences. When Izuku inquired about her quirk, Melissa felt a familiar pang of discomfort. She knew the question would come, and she braced herself for the typical reactions. With a deep breath, she admitted that she didn't have a quirk. Izuku's response was surprising. He expressed genuine interest rather than disappointment. He had never met someone without a quirk before and seemed unfazed by her revelation. Melissa was taken aback by his nonchalant attitude, as most people reacted negatively. Izuku smiled and offered friendship, which warmed Melissa's heart. She accepted, feeling a sense of connection. He then mentioned that he had another friend, Endeavor's daughter, Shoka, who had ice powers and could freeze a room in seconds. Melissa was intrigued, eager to learn more about her new friend and the adventures that lay ahead. She also had these incredible azure eyes that glowed when she felt strong emotions. In the next room, Endeavor and David examined the results of their scans. Endeavor found the findings intriguing. David pointed out that the scans revealed the boy had an extraordinary amount of muscle for his age. Endeavor confirmed this, recalling how the boy had bent one of his smaller weights as if it were made of aluminum foil. David speculated about the boy's potential as he grew. He then shifted the conversation to the boy's quirk, noting that it was unlike anything he had encountered before. The scans indicated a significant firepower, but there seemed to be something else, perhaps another ability. Endeavor noted that quirks often combined, but it wasn't uncommon for different quirks to function separately at first. He reflected on his own experience with his eldest son, who initially seemed to have only inherited Endeavor's firepower, which was much stronger than his own and had burned him. However, during training his son had awakened an ice power like his mother's, which protected him from the intense heat of his fire ability. David recalled seeing a boy like that during the UA first-year sports festival and confirmed that the boy was indeed Endeavor's son. Endeavor expressed pride in his son, believing he would become a great hero. Returning to the topic of Izuku, David lamented that until the boy's second quirk emerged, there was no way to identify it. Endeavor agreed, deciding it was best not to inform the boy, as he might attempt something dangerous to activate it. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed from outside, triggering Endeavor's hero instincts. He instinctively jumped in front of David, pushing him to the ground just as a powerful explosion rocked the building. Once the dust settled, Endeavor helped them both to their feet. The building was ablaze, much of it destroyed in the blast. He sensed an attack and urged David to evacuate. David's face reflected panic as he thought of his daughter, Melissa, who was powerless. He insisted they needed to save her, but Endeavor stopped him, explaining that the wreckage made it dangerous to navigate. He reassured David that he would get him out and then find the children. David reluctantly agreed, realizing he needed to trust Endeavor. Endeavor quickly assessed the hallway, which was in disarray, but the path to the staircase was clear. He instructed David to use the stairs to exit as quickly as possible while he went to find the children. As he retraced his steps to the room where the kids were, he prayed that Izuku was all right. He couldn't let Hisashi's only son perish in this chaos. Before he reached the room, he spotted Melissa carrying Izuku on her back down the hallway. The boy was unconscious but unharmed, while Melissa had a few bruises but appeared fine. Endeavor was impressed by Melissa's bravery. She explained that the room had caught fire after the explosion, and Izuku had absorbed the flames before fainting. With the ceiling threatening to collapse, she had taken it upon herself to carry him to safety. Endeavor acknowledged her courage, realizing that despite lacking a quirk, she had acted decisively when others might have frozen in fear. He took Izuku from her and lifted Melissa as well, flying them to safety. Outside, David felt immense relief when Endeavor brought the children out unharmed. Although they were worried about Izuku, Endeavor assured them he would be fine. David took the kids to be checked by the arriving medic. Endeavor then focused on evacuating the building and containing the fire. Just then, a large figure landed at the scene, declaring his presence. It was All Might, and the crowd gasped in surprise, except for Endeavor, who inquired about All Might's arrival. David explained that All Might had come for a costume upgrade. All Might informed them that villains had appeared on the island, causing chaos. He had dealt with the leader, but several underlings were still at large. Endeavor concluded that one of them must have caused the explosion and fire. All Might agreed, emphasizing the need to capture the villains before anyone else got hurt. Endeavor accepted the challenge and instructed David to look after the boy. The two heroes took off to handle the situation. A short time later, they learned that David, Melissa, and Izuku had been transported to the hospital. Both David and Melissa had been cleared, but Izuku was being monitored unharmed yet unresponsive. The two men stood outside the hospital room, where Melissa was at Izuku's bedside, visibly distressed. Endeavor made a call and then spoke with the doctors before entering the room. All Might expressed relief that David and Melissa were safe. David approached All Might, confirming that the villains had been captured. As they spoke, they heard Melissa crying. She was overwhelmed with guilt, believing it was her fault that Izuku had been hurt. Endeavor knelt to meet her gaze, asking her to explain. After a moment, she managed to collect herself and recounted how Izuku had sensed the explosion and pushed her to the ground, absorbing the fire before losing consciousness. Endeavor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, recognizing her bravery. He pointed out that she had acted with remarkable calmness in a dangerous situation, a quality that defined a true hero. Melissa was taken aback, questioning how she could be considered a hero without a quirk. Endeavor reassured her that it didn't matter. He had seen professionals falter in similar situations, but she had remained composed and had a plan. Thanks to that level-headedness, both Izuku and Melissa were safe. He placed his hand on her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. He expressed that she was a true hero, which caused her to tear up even more. In the present, Melissa concluded her story. She explained that Endeavor and Izuku were set to return to Japan, and they had exchanged information, keeping in touch through email and video chat. Shoka glanced at her boyfriend for confirmation. He nodded, having mentioned he had a pen pal who was a girl, but he hadn't revealed how cute she was. A wave of concern washed over her as she thought about the implications of this new friendship. Izuku then asked Melissa what brought her to Japan. She looked surprised and explained that she was applying to the UA Hero course and was staying with her uncle until the test. Izuku shared his excitement about being at UA as well, which made Shoka's heart sink. A girl this attractive, friends with Izuku, and attending UA was a potential threat. She needed to get closer to Melissa to assess the situation, and fortunately, Izuku provided the perfect opportunity. Curious, Izuku inquired if settling in had been difficult for Melissa. She replied that it wasn't too hard, except for not being able to use her quirk in public, which felt strange. A thought struck Izuku. He remembered Melissa had once said she didn't have a quirk. When he asked her about it, she revealed that she had become a late bloomer. Izuku felt a twinge of suspicion. Although there were rare cases of individuals developing powers later in life, he trusted Melissa and had no reason to doubt her. Still, something felt off. He asked what type of quirk she had, and she responded that it was a power type. Izuku recalled how she had easily crushed appliances like soda cans and carried them off the beach, which made sense now. He then asked if she had any other problems. Melissa admitted that she was still figuring out where everything was since she had only been in the country for about 2 weeks and had limited belongings. An idea sparked in Izuku's mind. He suggested that Shoka show Melissa around and help her gather what she needed. Melissa's face brightened at the suggestion, expressing her gratitude. Shoka hesitated, considering that Izuku was right about her upcoming recommendation trials. This would give her a chance to get to know Melissa better. She agreed to help and asked when Melissa was free. Melissa replied that she had every Saturday off, and they decided to meet on Saturday morning in 2 weeks. The two girls exchanged numbers to stay in contact. At that moment, a man in a tracksuit approached them, calling for Melissa to return to training. She acknowledged him as Uncle Yagi. He was tall and athletically built, with wild blonde hair and striking blue eyes that seemed to radiate an unseen power. Izuku recognized him and blurted out that he was the uncle Melissa was staying with and that he was training her. Yagi confirmed that he was a professional hero trainer, helping students prepare for hero course examinations. Izuku felt a sense of familiarity with Yagi's voice and eyes but couldn't quite place it. Meanwhile, Yagi reflected on how much Izuku had grown and noted that Melissa resembled her father, Endeavor, in height. Izuku wished Melissa good luck, and she thanked him before jogging back to the beach with Yagi. As they returned to training, Yagi recalled a past incident on Island. Endeavor had made a call to see a doctor and returned with news that a boy would be fine. All Might had been confused by this. Endeavor explained that he had contacted the boy's mother for permission to have the doctors care for him, revealing that the boy's current state was part of his power. He described how the boy could create and control blue flames while also absorbing fire and heat, but if he overused his power, he would enter a temporary state that usually lasted a few hours. All Might absorb this information, noting the unusual combination of abilities. The mention of blue fire triggered a memory of a blue fire user he had known. He scrutinized the boy more closely, realizing there could be no mistake. They were related. He asked Endeavor if the boy was connected to Night Sun, to which Endeavor smiled and confirmed that he was. All Might expressed his surprise, recalling that he hadn't known Night Sun had a son. Endeavor explained that his friend had wanted to keep his family safe from the limelight and had made him promise to help his son if needed. All Might nodded in understanding, and Endeavor mentioned he needed to make one more call to inform his family about the situation, not wanting them to worry if he was late returning home. All Might recalled that Endeavor had 4 children and smiled when Endeavor showed him a family picture. In the image, Endeavor was in civilian clothes with his arm around a woman with long white hair and brown eyes. Their 4 children stood in front of them, each resembling their parents in various ways. Next to her stood a tall boy with white hair. In the center of the group was a girl the same age as Izuku Midoriya. She had her father's eyes but her mother's gaze. Her hair was mostly white, with a wide streak of red on the right side. Beside her was Izuku Midoriya. Endeavor remarked on the beauty of the family, noting how he had truly taken the boy in. He explained that it was initially meant to be just training. All Might, curious, asked what had changed. Endeavor replied that the boy had changed everything. All Might looked puzzled as Endeavor continued, describing Izuku's powerful quirk and his ability to draw people in. He shared how his youngest daughter, Shoka, had always been serious and cold, but Izuku was the first to break through her icy demeanor. Now, they were inseparable, and the rest of the family had followed suit. Endeavor laughed, suggesting that Izuku would eventually become like a son to him, especially if Shoka had anything to say about it. All Might contemplated asking for more details but decided against it, sensing it might lead to more than he wanted to know. Endeavor then suggested they check on the kids, and All Might agreed. Reflecting on that day, All Might realized it was when everything changed for him, acknowledging that things would have been different without it. Meanwhile, Shoka and Izuku walked to the train station in silence until Shoka broke the quiet. She noticed something was bothering him and asked what was wrong. Izuku mentioned Melissa's uncle, expressing that he felt something familiar about him. Shoka agreed, recalling something in his eyes, but they both struggled to place it. Izuku rubbed his head in frustration, and Shoka teased him about going bald if he kept it up. Realizing he had been doing it absent-mindedly, he dismissed his worries, and Shoka reminded him he had plenty of his own concerns. After dropping Shoka off, Izuku headed home to get some rest. As the weeks passed, Shoka participated in the recommendation trials, where she excelled, outperforming all but one candidate. That candidate was Inasa Yorashi, a tall, energetic boy with a powerful wind quirk. Shoka found him a bit over the top but remained polite, congratulating him on his victory. Inasa expressed his admiration and recognized her as Endeavor's daughter, which made him even more eager to be friends and rivals. Shoka was taken aback by his kindness, as most people either idolized her or were envious. Inasa's demeanor reminded her of Izuku, prompting her to reflect on her previous thoughts about special people in her life, including Melissa Shield. Perhaps she had been mistaken in her beliefs. Later that day, Shoka called Izuku to share her acceptance into UA for the next school year. Izuku was thrilled, repeating his confidence in her success. Inko, overhearing, suggested they celebrate, but Shoka reminded them they should wait until Izuku passed his test. Both mother and son agreed. Shoka then mentioned Inasa, clarifying that their interaction was friendly but felt it was important for Izuku to know. He thanked her for her honesty and expressed happiness that she had met someone nice. He then asked if she was looking forward to her outing with Melissa. Shoka admitted she was nervous, and Izuku encouraged her to relax and be herself, suggesting that Melissa might become her first friend. Grateful for his support, Shoka promised to try. The next day, Shoka met Melissa at the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall, where they planned to shop for everything Melissa needed. The cheerful blonde was dressed casually in a pink checkerboard shirt, khakis, and brown boots, wearing glasses. Shoka matched her casual look with a blue t-shirt, black pants, and white tennis shoes. After exchanging compliments on their outfits, Shoka inquired about their shopping list. Melissa pulled out her phone, revealing a long list that included everything from hygiene products to underwear. Shoka was impressed by the extent of Melissa's needs, and they set off to shop. As they browsed various stores, they mostly focused on picking items, with little conversation beyond product advice. It was a typical girls' outing until Melissa decided to delve deeper into their backgrounds. She asked about Shoka and Izuku's relationship, and Shoka explained that their parents had been schoolmates, and Izuku's quirk had awakened after his father's passing. Melissa shared that she had also experienced loss at a young age, which resonated with Shoka. She noticed the familiar look of loss and loneliness in Melissa's eyes, reminiscent of Izuku's. Shoka expressed her sympathy, and Melissa acknowledged the difficulty of her experience, emphasizing that her mother remained with her in spirit. Shoka complimented Melissa on her strength, and they returned to their shopping, their bond growing deeper as they shared their stories. Dad brought Aizu and Inko to stay with them so he could help Izuku gain control of his power. Shoka, though unfazed on the outside, felt a little uneasy inside. She recalled that they were only 4 years old at the time and how she initially couldn't stand him, doing everything she could to push him away. As she thought back to that day, a young Shoka watched her father bring Izuku into the family training room. Usually, this was the time she and her brother Tuya spent with their dad. Tuya was all in on becoming a hero, and Shoka was too, but unlike her brother, she didn't aspire to be like their father. She wanted to be like someone else. Now, she worried that her father's attention would be further divided by this new kid, possibly slowing down her own progress. However, she couldn't voice those concerns, especially since he had just lost his dad. The training continued, and Izuku managed to incinerate his shirt. Endeavor mentioned they would need to get him some fireproof training gear. He created a simple fireball and executed a fire punch, all impressive feats for his first day. Shoka was taken aback by his firepower. Izuku's flames were more potent than her father's and Tuya's. Unlike Tuya, he didn't burn himself or overheat. It seemed that Tuya and Izuku quickly became friends, discussing various heroes and their abilities. At the end of the training, Izuku approached Shoka. He introduced himself, expressing a desire to be friends since he and his mom would be staying for a while. Shoka, however, responded coldly, stating she had no interest in being friends with someone who couldn't control his power. With that, she walked out, leaving Izuku in stunned silence. Tuya placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, reassuring him that Shoka didn't do well around new people but would eventually warm up to him. Izuku sensed something different about Shoka, but he chose to remain silent, trusting Tuya's judgment. A month passed, and while the pair trained together, Shoka continued to keep her distance. Finally, one day, Izuku confronted her in the gardens, where she was watching birds play. He asked why she was pushing him away. Shoka didn't look away from the birds and feigned ignorance. Izuku insisted she knew exactly what he meant, pointing out how she brushed him off and never engaged with him. He then expressed his concern, saying she looked lonely. Shoka's azure eyes widened in surprise at his observation. When he explained he could see it in her eyes, she unexpectedly began to cry, revealing her emotional struggles. She shared how her powerful quirk made others envious and how people placed her on a pedestal, leading to her isolation. Izuku, recalling the emotional turmoil he had witnessed when his own father passed away, approached her and wrapped her in a comforting hug. Shoka was taken aback by the gesture, having never been embraced by anyone outside her family. But she settled into the hug, allowing herself to cry into his shoulder. After a few moments, she regained her composure and apologized for her cold demeanor. Izuku reassured her that it was okay, understanding her desire to protect herself. Shoka explained that her quirk emitted cold instead of heat, leading some to think she was strange. Izuku, however, found her coldness refreshing, having not felt it since his quirk activated. Reflecting on their emotional exchange, Shoka acknowledged that after sharing her feelings, they became friends. Melissa, listening intently, wiped away a tear and remarked on how it was clear Shoka had developed feelings for Izuku. Shoka admitted she had grown attached to him but wouldn't label it as love just yet. That would come gradually over the next few years, solidified during another emotional moment best saved for another time. Melissa, eager to become closer friends, asked if she could have the honor of being Shoka's second friend. Shoka smiled slightly, expressing that she would really like that. They decided to finish their shopping and grab something to eat, both feeling lighter and more at ease. As they continued their outing, Shoka found joy in sharing girl talk with Melissa. She wondered if Melissa possessed a secret quirk that made others feel relaxed around her, as she seemed effortlessly calm and easygoing. The day concluded with Shoka learning more about her new friend. Melissa's father was a scientist working on developing quirk support items, and she had acquired her quirk later than most. It had taken a lot of hard work for her to master her abilities, which amplified her strength and speed. Shoka grew increasingly impressed with Melissa, understanding why Izuku was drawn to her. As the day came to a close, Melissa had gathered her supplies, and Shoka showed her home, wishing her luck on the entrance exam. Melissa expressed her gratitude and reminded her to be cautious on the way home. While Shoka's next 4 years were already determined, Izuku, Bakugo, and Melissa's journey was just beginning. The last month of preparation had flown by, and it was now time for the UA General Entrance Exam. Izuku and Bakugo took a train to the UA campus, and Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of the impressive grounds. He marveled at the thought of all the first-class heroes who had once walked those halls, feeling a rush of excitement. Bakugo, however, urged him to calm down, reminding him of the purpose of their visit. Izuku apologized, his enthusiasm bubbling over. Just then, Melissa's shield approached them, running with energy. She greeted them warmly, and Bakugo, though gruff, acknowledged her presence with a teasing remark about her growing fanbase. Melissa smiled, mentioning her recent meeting with Shoka, whom she found delightful. Bakugo, confused but uninterested, moved on toward the testing hall, urging them to keep up. They entered a large lecture hall where they took the written exam. The questions were challenging, covering everything from basic hero laws to advanced hero ethics. Izuku felt he had barely passed. After the tests were collected, a new figure entered the room. He was a tall man with an extravagant hairstyle, dressed in a leather outfit and wearing a peculiar device around his neck. He introduced himself as Present Mike, announcing that they had completed the first stage of the entrance exam and were about to begin the physical exam. Izuku excitedly shared his admiration for Present Mike's radio show, but Bakugo interrupted him, insisting that now was not the time for distractions. Present Mike distributed handouts explaining that the test would involve facing off against robot villains, each assigned a point value based on difficulty. Their goal was to defeat the robots and accumulate points, with the highest scorers passing the exam. Bakugo expressed his frustration at the setup, realizing they were assigned to different testing fields. Izuku understood the strategy behind it, but both boys were determined not to let it hinder them. They exchanged a fist bump, solidifying their resolve. A tall boy with glasses raised a concern about the handout listing 4 types of villains instead of 3. He directed his annoyance at Izuku, who was still caught up in his excitement. Bakugo defended Izuku, but Present Mic calmed the situation, clarifying that the 4th type of villain was a trap worth 0 points, meant to challenge them. He encouraged everyone to avoid it and focus on the other villains. With that, Present Mic urged them to head to their respective testing sites, reminding them of the school motto, Plus Ultra. The two rivals wished each other luck, with Bakugo jokingly threatening Izuku if he didn't pass. Soon after, Izuku found himself at the battle site, surrounded by over 100 test takers, many equipped with special gear to enhance their quirks. Izuku wore a combat suit provided by Endeavor, made from a material that could withstand high heat, allowing him to use his powers without damaging his clothes. As he surveyed the crowd, he spotted Melissa in a pink tracksuit, equipped with metal bands that likely helped her harness her abilities. He also noticed the tall boy from earlier, sipping orange juice, and a short girl with rosy cheeks, visibly nervous. Just then, the gate to the battle stage opened, and Izuku dashed forward, with Melissa right behind him. Present Mic's voice rang out, urging everyone to start moving as there were no starting signals in real combat. Izuku quickly located 3 robots, 2 one-pointers and a 3-pointer. He conjured 3 large fireballs and took them out, earning 5 points. He continued to eliminate more robots, and when he saw a fellow student struggling against a group of attackers, he swooped down to help. He lifted the boy to safety and then unleashed a wave of fire upon the robots, melting them away. The heat was intense, but Izuku managed to control the flames, avoiding disaster. He reflected on the close call, determined to keep pushing forward. Izuku recognized that he needed to refine his move further. If there had been more bystanders, the situation could have turned dire. He waved to the kid and took off into the sky. Meanwhile, Melissa was utilizing her enhanced speed to navigate the battle stage. She encountered numerous robots and swiftly dealt with them. In some instances, she assisted or rescued other test takers. By her count, she had accumulated 45 points. A thought crossed her mind. The test was combat-based, which would only attract the best fighters. Yue's mission was to cultivate true heroes. She speculated whether there was a hidden parameter or point system in play. Regardless, she resolved to continue pushing forward and embody the spirit of a true hero. In a dark control room, 3 men observed the test. The first was Endeavor, who had requested to watch this year's test. As a distinguished graduate of the hero course, he had been granted permission. Beside him sat Nizu, the principal of UA, who resembled a blend of a mouse and a bear. The last man was Toshinori Yagi, known as the Hero All Might. Endeavor grunted in response to Yagi's inquiry about his enjoyment of the view. He noted that while he saw several promising candidates, many seemed hopeless. Yagi then asked Endeavor why he was present, given that his daughter had already passed the recommendation interviews. Endeavor expressed his pride in her, stating she would become a great hero like her mother. He explained that he was there because his nephew was taking the test. Curious, Yagi asked which nephew Endeavor meant, and Endeavor pointed out Izuku. Yagi remarked on Izuku's impressive abilities but noted that he did not resemble Endeavor. Endeavor clarified that they were not related by blood. Izuku was the son of his best friend, who had grown up calling him uncle, and Endeavor considered him family. Yagi recognized Izuku's potential and recalled seeing him at the beach with Melissa. A memory surfaced of a fire years ago, where a small child had bravely held back flames to save a life dear to him. Turning to Endeavor, Yagi asked if Izuku was the same boy from that incident. Endeavor confirmed it, and Nizu interjected, questioning whether Izuku was related to Night Sun. The name struck Yagi with great force, and he confirmed that Izuku was indeed Night Sun's son. Endeavor explained that after the tragedy, the World Hero Commission had concealed the connection to protect Izuku. Yagi lamented the tragedy of never finding the villain responsible for Night Sun's death and that of his team. The three men shared a moment of solemn reflection. Endeavor then turned to Yagi, suggesting that if he was present, it meant he had chosen a successor. Yagi reflected on the past few years, recalling how he had decided on Melissa as his successor after the incident at David's lab. His final battle with All for One had been a turning point, and although he had been fortunate to recover thanks to Ares' powers, he realized that he needed to prepare for a time when he would no longer be able to protect the world. He had brought Endeavor into his inner circle, recognizing him as the most powerful hero in Japan, and had also included Aizawa, who was responsible for Eri. As Melissa's image appeared on the screen, Yagi praised her as having the heart of a true hero. Endeavor recognized her as David Shield's daughter and agreed that she was a good choice. Yagi noted that they had the son of a global hero, the daughter of the number 2 hero, and the successor to One for All, along with young Eri. It seemed they were in for an exciting year. Nizu took a sip of his tea before announcing that they had reached the halfway mark and it was time to intensify the challenge. A man at the control console pressed a red button, causing numerous lights to flash. Back on the field, Izuku counted 58 points. He landed and took a moment to breathe, realizing he still had 5 minutes left of the original 10 and the opportunity to earn more points. Suddenly, Melissa appeared behind him, catching him off guard. He wondered how she had gotten there so quickly, impressed by her speed and strength. She informed him that she had scored 57 points, and they agreed that they should aim for a few more. Without warning, the ground trembled, and the sound of grinding gears filled the air. A giant shadow loomed over them as several fellow test-takers rushed toward them, one of whom was a boy wearing glasses. He warned them to get clear, stating they couldn't handle the approaching monster. Amidst the chaos, a scream pierced the air. Izuku recognized the voice of a short girl from the entrance, who was trapped under fallen rubble. The 0-point robot was advancing toward her, and she wouldn't be able to escape in time. Izuku looked at Melissa, who nodded in understanding. He asked if she could get the girl to safety since she was faster, and she agreed. He then prepared to confront the robot, acknowledging that it wouldn't be an easy task. They both set off toward the danger. Melissa reached the girl first and used her strength to free her from the rubble. Though the girl was safe, her ankle was badly twisted. Melissa lifted her and began to carry her to safety. While one problem was resolved, the robot continued to close in. Melissa couldn't run at full speed with the girl in her arms, which could cause further injury. It was Izuku's turn to act. He soared into the air, summoning his flames, his body glowing with a dark blue fire as he prepared to confront the threat. He created a fireball in his hands, about the size of a softball. Focusing all his power into it, the orb grew to over 100 times its original size. Once he felt it was large enough, Izuku launched it at the robots. The powerful attack struck the bot, the force causing its metallic exterior to be blown away, while the intense heat rendered its internal mechanisms useless. Izuku looked at the destruction with a smile on his face, but soon began to feel lightheaded. He had exerted too much power and needed to land before losing consciousness. Touching down, he was approached by Melissa, who praised his abilities and assured him that the girl was fine. He smiled at her words, but then fainted. Melissa attempted to catch him, but quickly withdrew her hand as Izuku was too hot to touch. He hit the ground with a dull thud. An air horn sounded, and Mike announced the end of the test, informing everyone that medical treatment would be provided to those in need. A small elderly woman dressed like a nurse entered the field. She comforted the students, saying they had all done well, and even if they didn't pass, they were winners in her eyes. A curious child asked who she was, and the boy with the laser powers explained that she was Recovery Girl, the school nurse and a youthful hero, the reason UA could hold such challenging entrance exams. The hero approached the girl with pink cheeks and examined her ankle, which had been twisted. With a gentle kiss, the girl's ankle healed, and her breathing returned to normal. Melissa then brought Izuku over to Recovery Girl after he had cooled down, laying him down in front of her. She informed the nurse that he was the boy who had destroyed the 0-pointer in one shot. Recovery Girl examined Izuku closely and reassured them that he would be fine. He had simply overexerted himself and would wake up shortly. Just as she said that, Izuku regained consciousness, confused about what had happened and where the robot was. He realized he had passed out. Both Melissa and the pink-cheeked girl were surprised by his quick recovery. He apologized for worrying them, explaining that using so much fire at once often made him dizzy. Attempting to stand, he stumbled slightly to emphasize his point. Recovery girl handed him a candy bar, advising him to eat it for a boost. Izuku quickly consumed the bar, feeling its effects almost immediately, allowing him to stand normally. He introduced himself to Ochako Uraraka, expressing his relief that she was safe. She thanked him and Melissa for their help. As the test concluded, the students faced the difficult wait for their results. Preparing for the test had been the easy part. This was the real challenge. Finally, a plain white envelope from UA arrived. Izuku stared at it, knowing that its contents would change his future. He thought of his mother, Shoka, his uncle Enji, and Bakugo, realizing he would not face whatever lay ahead alone. He owed it to them to be brave. With determination, he tore open the letter, and a small metal disc fell out, projecting a holographic screen into the air. The energetic principal, a hybrid of various animals, greeted him. He announced that Izuku had passed the written exam with flying colors and had also excelled in the practical portion, scoring an impressive 54 villain points. Izuku felt elated, but the message continued. The principal explained that they were not solely grading combat abilities. UA aimed to produce great heroes, and while fighting skills were important, so were the qualities of a true hero. They rewarded rescue points for those who acted heroically, emphasizing that saving people was a hero's main job. Izuku understood this well. He had also performed admirably in that regard, earning an astounding 52 rescue points, giving him the top score among the new first years. The screen displayed the top 10 scores, with Izuku's name at the top, followed by Melissa in second and Bakugo in third. He was happy to see that his friends had also succeeded. Exiting his room, he found his mother pacing nervously. Upon seeing him, she broke into tears and embraced him tightly. Later that night, Izuku called Shoka, who was thrilled to hear he had passed. She jokingly lamented that she wouldn't get to punish him now. Izuku could sense her joy, and she promised to come over the next day to celebrate. With that call concluded, he lay in bed, smiling widely, feeling accomplished. He spoke to his father in his thoughts, expressing his hope that he would be proud of him for getting into UA. The next morning, Izuku awoke early, dressed in his new uniform, ate breakfast, and packed his school bag. His mother wished him luck as he dashed out the door to catch the train. At the station, he met Bakugo, and the two rode together. Izuku was unusually quiet, prompting Bakugo to inquire about the situation. Curious about Ochako, Bakugo asked where she was, expecting her to accompany Izuku. Izuku explained that they had decided to keep their relationship private on the first day, as there would be enough going on. Bakugo expressed his disbelief, noting that most guys would be eager to show off a girlfriend like hers. He accepted Izuku's choice and asked about their class. Both discovered they were in Class 1A, which pleased Bakugo, who welcomed the competition. Upon arriving at the classroom, Izuku marveled at the massive door, wondering if giants attended UA. Even Shoka's exceptionally tall girlfriend would fit through the door. Meanwhile, Shoka had arrived at school and met up with Melissa, who was also early. They were now in the 1A classroom, where they encountered several classmates. Shoka learned that the other recommended student was a girl named Momo Yayorozu. Momo seemed nice enough, though a bit serious. Everything was going smoothly. All the students appeared friendly, and no one commented on Shoka's height or appearance. However, one boy with a lightning bolt hairstyle attempted to ask her out, but she turned him down flatly, leaving him looking somewhat dejected. Shoka wondered if she had been too harsh. Just then, Izuku and Bakugo entered the room. Bakugo took a seat at the front and propped his feet on the desk. A tall boy quickly approached him, insisting that it was improper to put his feet on school property. Bakugo dismissed him rudely, but Izuku stepped in to defuse the situation. Shortly after, a lively brunette entered, clearly excited to see Izuku. This sight triggered Shoka's protective instincts. Who was this girl, and why was she so cheerful? Before she could find out, a gruff voice interrupted. If you're here to make friends, then you can leave. The students looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice. They finally spotted a man in a yellow sleeping bag standing at the door. Shoka couldn't recall seeing him before. The man stood up and unzipped his bag. "My name is Shoto Aizawa, your homeroom teacher." The revelation stunned everyone. This man looked disheveled, not like a hero at all. The surprises continued as Aizawa pulled a stack of gym uniforms from his bag, leaving Shoka baffled about how he managed that. "All of you put one of these on and meet me on the sports field." A girl with pink cheeks expressed concern. "But sir, the orientation. We're going to miss it." "You don't have time to worry about that." Aizawa's voice was flat yet commanding. "You have 3 years here to become heroes. It's my job to ensure you don't endanger yourselves or others." The class fell silent at his words, understanding the truth behind them. Everyone quickly grabbed a uniform and went to change. Once on the field, Izuku noticed there were only 19 students present, even though there had been 20 seats in the classroom. Someone was missing, but he couldn't dwell on it now. "Today, students, you will participate in a quirk assessment test. You've been taking written exams until now, but you haven't truly pushed your quirks to their limits. Today you will. There will be 8 tests to gauge your strengths and areas for improvement." Several students looked confused, but Izuku understood. The tests would provide Aizawa with a baseline of their abilities and potential. Despite his appearance, Aizawa was clearly intelligent. "It seems some of you are still confused. Midoriya, what was your farthest softball throw in middle school?" "About 95 meters, I think." Aizawa tossed him a ball. "Try it now with your quirk." Izuku nodded, contemplating how to approach this. He felt the ball, noting the metal ring, likely a sensor, and the texture of a chemical agent on its surface. He summoned fire in his hand, surrounding the ball with a thin layer of flames without burning it. This gave him an idea. Taking a deep breath, he focused on his fire and threw the ball as hard as he could, launching the flames with it. The ball soared into the sky, disappearing from sight. Aizawa's phone displayed a reading of 710 meters, leaving the class in awe. A girl with pink horns spoke up. "So, it's a physical test, but we can use our quirks. This will be so much fun." Aizawa's eyes turned red. "Fun, you say? Well, how is this for fun? The person who comes in last will be expelled." Panic spread across many faces. Uraraka voiced the concern of the group. "But we just got here. You can't just send us away after one day. It's not fair." "Are earthquakes fair?" Aizawa's words silenced the room. "How about tsunamis or villain attacks? This world is filled with unfairness. It's a hero's job to combat that unfairness." He paused to let his words sink in. "Here at UA, we are not bound by tradition. I run this class as I see fit. If you want to be real heroes, show me your resolve. If the threat of expulsion is too much, then leave now. You don't belong here." With that, the test began. Izuku, Bakugo, Shoka, and Melissa performed well, their diverse powers earning them high marks in several events. Aizawa had Izuku repeat some tests, once while flying and once normally, to get a complete view of his abilities. Izuku complied without hesitation. After the test concluded, the students anxiously awaited their scores. Who would be going home? Aizawa stood before them, expressionless. "You probably have an idea of where you rank, but here are the scores." His phone projected a hologram displaying the results. Momo Yaoyorozu topped the list, followed by Shoka. Izuku, Bakugo, and Melissa all placed in the top 10. Everyone turned to see who was in last place. A short boy with peculiar hair named Minor Mineta. The small boy began to complain that it was unfair, lamenting that he hadn't even had a chance to interact with any girls. Izuku found this concern strange. Aizawa turned off the hologram. "Oh, no one is getting expelled." Surprise rippled through the group, with several students exclaiming that he had deceived them. Aizawa smirked. "That was just a rational deception to motivate you to perform your best." Momo then spoke up. "I can't believe you all didn't figure that out. I should have said something. You can all get changed now. Make sure to grab a syllabus from the classroom and read it over before tomorrow." Dismissed. As everyone turned to follow his instructions, Aizawa called out to Shoka and Izuku. "Hang back for a minute." He pulled the two aside. Shield noticed that Izuku was holding back during the test, his performance lacking the dynamism he had shown in the entrance exam. Izuku explained that he still struggled to control his full power. If he unleashed it, he feared his bones would break. During the entrance exam, he had special support items to help manage that, but they were currently being adjusted. Aizawa acknowledged Izuku's cautious thinking, stating that a hero with broken bones would be of no use to anyone. He urged Izuku to gain better control over his abilities and not to rely solely on the support items for safety. Izuku affirmed his intention to improve. Afterward, Aizawa asked Izuku about his lineage, revealing he had heard that Izuku was the son of Night Sun. Izuku confirmed this, curious about how Aizawa knew. Aizawa explained that UA had access to information others did not, and that Night Sun was a distinguished graduate. Izuku learned that Aizawa had once worked with his father during a mission against a villain cell in Tokyo. Aizawa described Night Sun as an exceptional hero who executed a well-planned raid with minimal damage, leaving a lasting impression on him. Izuku felt a sense of pride hearing this, as he had only heard stories about his father from family members. Aizawa continued, emphasizing that he expected great things from Izuku based on his test results and warned him not to disappoint. Izuku promised he wouldn't. Before Aizawa left, Izuku felt compelled to share that he and Shoka were in a relationship. Aizawa listened and acknowledged that it was none of his business but appreciated Izuku's honesty. He reminded Izuku to ensure that his relationship did not interfere with his training or studies. After changing out of his gym uniform, Izuku and his classmates returned to the classroom to relax before heading home. On the way, he spotted Aizawa conversing with a young girl who appeared to be his age. She had a lean, athletic build, long periwinkle hair, ruby red eyes, and a small horn on her forehead. Despite the summer heat, she wore long sleeves and stockings, which struck Izuku as unusual. To his surprise, he recognized her as the girl he had met at the restaurant after the slime villain incident. He recalled her mentioning that her last name was also Aizawa, making him wonder if there was a connection. Bakugo noticed Izuku staring and teased him about keeping secrets regarding his girlfriend. They speculated that the girl might be the empty seat in their class and pondered why she hadn't participated in the tests. When they reached the classroom, they found Mineta and Kaminari chatting animatedly. They were discussing the abundance of attractive girls at UA, with Kaminari expressing his disappointment over being turned down by a girl he found intimidating. Izuku felt a surge of protectiveness for the girl being discussed and exchanged a knowing look with Bakugo. They silently agreed to have some fun with Mineta and Kaminari. Approaching their classmates, Izuku introduced himself and Bakugo, who grunted in acknowledgement. The conversation shifted back to the girl with white hair, whom they learned had entered UA through recommendations. Izuku commented that she seemed nice, while Kaminari lamented his cold reception from her. Bakugo listened, amused, as Mineta challenged Kaminari's charm. They made a bet regarding Kaminari's ability to ask the girl out, with Izuku confidently raising the stakes by claiming he would not only ask her out but also get her to hug him. As they discussed their wager, Kaminari spotted the girl approaching. Encouraged by his friends, he prepared to make his move. Shoka walked toward the class, having made a new friend in the girl who had spoken to Izuku earlier. She was grateful to him for saving her during the entrance exam, feeling a sense of camaraderie. That made Shoka feel better. However, she noticed that all her classmates were very pretty, and a twinge of jealousy crept into her mind as she worried they might make a move on Aizu. That could not happen. So, on the way back to the room, she decided to tell the girls about her relationship. They paused in the hallway, their faces stunned, followed by a flurry of questions. Shoka answered the ones she deemed appropriate and ignored the others. As the group approached the room, Ashido, the pink girl who had previously annoyed Aizawa, warned her that this was not the end of the questions. Shoka figured it wasn't. Upon entering the room, Shoka noticed the boys had split off into several groups. She spotted Aizu and Bakugo talking to the great boy and the lighting kid. At that moment, Aizu walked up to the group and asked if he could borrow Todoroki for a few minutes. Several girls commented on his gentlemanly behavior and agreed. Aizu leaned in to whisper to Shoka, asking her to grab her books and meet him in the hallway. She complied. Once outside, she placed her books on the ground and asked what was going on. Aizu requested her help with something, hinting it involved the grape creep and the lighting dolt. He explained the bet and asked if she would assist him. Shoka hesitated, stating she couldn't approve of such tactics on their first day of school. However, since everyone would know about them by morning, she agreed. Aizu was relieved and admitted he wasn't looking forward to having to wave girls off. Shoka smiled, revealing she had already told the girls about their relationship. Aizu was pleased, as he preferred not to explain he had a girlfriend. He simply wanted to be her boyfriend. Touched by his words, Shoka asked what he needed. Aizu explained, and she agreed, knowing everyone was watching from the door. Clearing her throat, she declared that she would go out with him, reaching down to hug him carefully, avoiding any awkwardness in public. She then kissed him on the cheek to emphasize her words. In the doorway, the two boys were left speechless. Bakugo quickly collected the money from the two and hurried out of the room. The girls were moved by the display, though they wondered why Kaminari and Mineta looked so horrified. Bakugo approached the couple, mentioning he had their money. When Aizu asked about the new nickname, Bakugo explained that the two boys had been calling him King as he took their money. Aizu felt a sense of pride, despite knowing it was wrong. They decided it was time to leave, but Shoka realized she hadn't received her syllabus. Aizu handed her the paper, and she affectionately called him her hero. She tucked the paper with her books and linked her arm through his as they walked toward the exit. Shortly after, Melissa joined them, and the group headed to the train together. The second day at UA arrived, and the class gathered in the room ahead of the bell. The girls surrounded Shoka, eager to ask her questions about her revelation from the previous day. Finally, Melissa told the others to calm down. Meanwhile, Kaminari and Mineta were trying to interrogate Aizu, but Bakugo told them to stop complaining. They had been outsmarted. At that moment, Aizawa forcefully slid the door open, reminding everyone to be in their seats when the bell rang. The class quickly complied, and Aizawa nodded in approval. He addressed the class, announcing that their normal classes would begin soon, but first, he had an important announcement. Some students may have noticed the empty seat in the room, as it was typical for the two freshman classes to start with 20 students. However, the entrance of their final classmate had been unusual, and the principal felt they deserved an explanation. The class listened intently as Aizawa cleared his throat and turned to the door, inviting the newcomer in. A 15-year-old girl entered, possessing a lean athletic build, pale skin, light blue hair, and big red eyes, with a horn on the right side of her forehead. Izuku and Bakugo recognized her immediately as the girl Aizawa had spoken to the day before, confirming she was indeed the final member of their class. Aizawa introduced her as Eri Aizawa, his daughter. The class was taken aback by this revelation, unable to believe that Aizawa had a daughter, especially since she bore no resemblance to him. Aizawa continued, explaining that Eri's acceptance to UA was atypical. She hadn't had to pass the entrance exam like most students. Instead, she was admitted on the special recommendation of the principal and staff members. Izuku realized she must be extraordinary to have received such an opportunity. Aizawa mentioned that Eri insisted on introducing herself and sharing her story. Eri bowed and recounted her past, revealing she had been held captive by a villain who experimented on her due to her quirk. She was rescued by All Might and a group of heroes, after which she was raised at UA to help her gain control of her abilities. Eventually, Aizawa adopted her and continued her training. When the principal and staff asked if she wanted to join the hero course, she expressed her desire to learn how to save people, just like All Might and Aizawa had done for her. The class fell silent for a moment, then erupted into tears and cheers, expressing how moved they were by her story. Ida stood up, giving an enthusiastic applause that made everyone smile. They welcomed her warmly into their class. Aizawa managed to regain control of the class and announced that their lessons would now begin. Present Mike entered to start the English class, and the day continued. As afternoon approached, it was time for hero studies. All Might burst into the room, announcing his arrival with enthusiasm. The students rejoiced, excited to see the number one hero. The students were astonished that he was actually teaching at UA this year. Melissa's uncle had informed her of his new role, explaining that it served two purposes: to keep a close eye on her progress and to impart his hard-earned lessons as a hero to the next generation. The giant man instructed the newcomers to prepare themselves, stating that their training would commence that day. He pressed a button on the lectern, and several shelves emerged from the wall, revealing their hero costumes, designed by professionals based on the forms they submitted upon acceptance to UA. He urged them to change and meet at Ground Beta for training. Soon enough, the class arrived at Ground Beta, a mock city reminiscent of the testing fields from the entrance exams. Izuku and his classmates marveled at how UA could afford to construct such elaborate facilities, speculating that it must have cost a fortune. The instructor remarked that clothes make the hero, and the students looked impressive in their costumes. Izuku's outfit consisted of a blue sleeveless shirt and pants, equipped with a belt featuring several pockets for medical supplies and equipment. He wore black gloves and combat shoes designed to prevent him from melting anything he touched. The rest of his suit was fireproof, a necessary precaution given his abilities. As he adjusted to his new suit, Shoka approached him. Her costume was a black shirt and pants paired with white boots, accented by red stripes along her sides. A white waist-length jacket with several pockets completed her look, with the letters AO stitched onto the shoulders. Izuku complimented her appearance, and Shoka crossed her arms, playfully responding to his comment about ice. She explained that while she might have the legs for a skirt, it would be impractical in battle, and they both acknowledged the point. The next training scenario involved Shoka and Shoji as the heroes, facing off against Hagakure, who had the power of invisibility, and Ojiro, who possessed a tail, as the villains. The villain team set up while the heroes waited on the field. Meanwhile, Eri approached Bakugo, who looked at her dismissively. She noticed his bruises and offered to help heal them. Bakugo brushed off her concern but allowed her to proceed. Eri activated her power, but to her confusion, it did not work as expected. She had healed various injuries before, and this was the first time her ability had failed. She resolved to discuss it with her father and All Might after class. As the villain team completed their setup, the heroes were released to find them. Shoka instructed Shoji to wait outside, emphasizing that it would be safer for him. She entered the building, kneeling to place her hands on the ground. Her cold azure eyes glowed as she unleashed her power, encasing the entire building in ice. She ascended to the top floor, where her opponents guarded the bomb. Ojiro attempted to stop her, but she warned him against it, suggesting he would regret the attempt. Hagakure complained about the cold, and Shoka noted the oddity of her being undressed, questioning the legality of it. Approaching the bomb, Shoka placed her hand on it, and back in the control room, the students were astonished as she finished the match in under 2 minutes. Izuku and Bakugo exchanged glances, both recognizing Shoka's overwhelming power. Bakugo reflected on his classmates, realizing that while he had only considered Izuku a threat to his goal of becoming number 1, Shoka's abilities now posed a significant challenge as well. All Might declared Shoka's team the winners, and she snapped her fingers, causing the ice to melt away. The assistant robots provided towels and blankets for the villain team. After everyone was checked out, the two teams returned to the control room for a review. Shoka received praise for her performance, with All Might commending her control and strategic thinking. She appreciated his feedback but was more interested in another opinion. To her surprise, Bakugo approached her during the preparations for the next match. He acknowledged her impressive performance, albeit in his usual blunt manner, and expressed his determination to catch up to her strength. As he walked away to talk to Izuku, Shoka reflected on his words, feeling a glimmer of hope for his character. All Might called for the next match to begin. Melissa and Uraraka, the heroes, were facing off against Yaoyorozu and Mineta, the villains. At that moment, the villains were preparing their defenses. Shoka watched in admiration as Momo created steel-plated barriers to block the door to the weapon. She was impressed by Momo's quirk and turned to Aizawa, who had commented on it. Shoka asked if he thought Momo could create anything with her ability. Aizawa explained that during the quirk assessment test, Momo had crafted devices to achieve the best scores, and he was eager to see how she would perform in this match. Shoka expressed her concern that Momo might struggle against Melissa, who was known for her strength. Aizawa agreed, noting that the outcome would depend on whether Momo could counter Melissa's brute force. Eri nodded in agreement, and Shoka felt a twinge of irritation when she recalled the girl who had arrived at Class 1A that morning. She recognized her as the girl Izu had met at the restaurant. Shoka had imagined various scenarios based on Izu's description of her as not ugly, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The girl was absolutely adorable, like a doll brought to life. This revelation raised many questions about Izu that Shoka would have to ask him later. As the match began, the hero team entered through a window and navigated through the building. Soon, they arrived at the villain's hideout. Melissa and Uraraka exchanged glances, but the audience couldn't hear their conversation. Uraraka took cover down the hall while Melissa steadied herself and drew back her arm. Eri, watching intently, noticed a strange phenomenon. She thought she saw pink lighting surrounding Melissa, but Eri was confused, insisting that Melissa had merely taken a stance. On the screen, Melissa unleashed a powerful punch, breaking through the steel door as if it were made of paper. Uraraka rejoined her partner, and they both entered the room, but Melissa suddenly vanished from view. Eri expressed her concern about Melissa's disappearance, but Aizawa pointed out that Melissa's speed was likely beyond the camera's ability to track. Just then, Melissa reappeared, having tied up Momo and Mineta while Uraraka secured the bomb. All Might declared Melissa and Uraraka the winners of the match, praising their performance. He emphasized the importance of acting quickly to neutralize the enemy before they could react, but he also cautioned Melissa to be careful when breaking down structures to avoid potential collapses. The remaining matches continued, with each team performing admirably and receiving feedback from Professor All Might, who impressed the students with his insights. As the matches concluded, All Might gathered everyone at the front gate of Ground Beta. He commended the young heroes for completing the exercise without major injuries and affirmed that they all had the potential to become true heroes. Azui spoke up, thanking All Might for his positivity, noting that Mr. Aizawa could sometimes be a downer. Eri nodded in agreement, expressing her love for her dad but acknowledging that his teaching methods could be a bit discouraging. All Might smiled brightly, declaring his mission to bring enthusiasm to the academy. He struck a heroic pose and announced that it was time for the final lesson of the day, how a hero makes an exit. He dashed off at full speed, leaving several students marveling at his speed. After locking a door behind him, All Might's body began to emit white smoke as he shrank in size, his muscles deflating. He lamented how he could barely maintain his muscular form for one class and realized that passing his power to Melissa was taking a toll on him faster than expected. He hoped he could keep up appearances until Melissa graduated, but he worried that he might not have enough time left. He would have to rely on the current heroes to step up in the meantime. Once the class changed and reconvened, students exchanged compliments about their matches. Shoka and Eri received several praises. Shoka pulled Izuku aside, and several girls watched them with interest. She asked him what he thought of her match, and Izuku smiled, saying it was a bit over the top but appreciated her not holding back. He noted that their classmates now understood who they were dealing with. Shoka thanked him and then shifted the conversation to Eri, asking if he had noticed how adorable she was. Izuku, looking confused, replied that he had noticed but didn't care. Shoka was taken aback and pressed him for an explanation. Izuku reaffirmed that Shoka was the only girl for him, which made her beam with joy. Mina Ishido, who had been listening, was moved by Izuku's comment, tears welling in her eyes. Hagakure also overheard and remarked on how cute the pair was. Realizing they needed to create some distance from their classmates, Shoka and Izuku shook their heads, acknowledging that while their classmates were a bit much, they weren't wrong about being cute together. Shoka then asked Izuku if he wanted to accompany her to the train station, but Ishido interrupted, excitedly announcing that the girls had decided to enjoy some tea at a nearby cafe before heading out. Izuku was surprised but pleased, and Shoka confirmed it sounded like fun. They exchanged smiles, silently agreeing it was fine for her to make friends. Izuku wished her a good time. At the cafe, the girls from Class 1A pulled 2 tables together to sit together. The group included Shoka, Eri, Uraraka, Ashido, Hagakure, and Melissa, while Momo, Jiro, and Azui opted out, sensing that Ashido and Hagakure wanted to interrogate Shoka about her relationship with Izuku. The 6 girls ordered their drinks and began chatting, exchanging compliments about their training. The conversation turned to Eri, and Hagakure bluntly asked how she could be Aizawa's daughter when they looked nothing alike. Eri explained that Aizawa was one of the heroes who saved her when she was young and later adopted her, stating it was the most logical course of action. Uraraka chimed in, eager to learn more. Eri nodded, recalling a time when she had no control over her powers. She explained that her father was the only one who could stop her if she lost control. Melissa remembered something from their first day, mentioning that Izuku had said Mr. Aizawa's hero name was Eraserhead, a name that made sense given his ability to temporarily remove people's quirks. Eri confirmed that Mr. Aizawa had indeed trained her, although it was challenging since her power only affected living things. Ashido perked up, recalling that Eri's quirk was called Rewind. Eri explained that while it started out simply, it had evolved since then. She mentioned how she had frozen Ida in place during an exercise, revealing that she could control the flow of time on living beings, allowing her to rewind or freeze them. However, she admitted that her powers had limits. Her freezing ability lasted only about a minute, and her rewind was powerful but risky, as it could potentially erase someone from existence. Ashido found this fascinating and expressed her admiration. The group enjoyed their tea for a few moments until Ashido's curiosity took over. She pointed at Shoka, demanding to know more about Midoriya. Shoka remained unfazed, responding that they were together. The other girls exchanged glances, wondering if Shoka was being intentionally vague. Melissa suggested that they wanted to know more specifics about the relationship, such as how long they had been together. Shoka revealed that it had been almost 2 years, which brought some relief to the group. They then asked if it was difficult being with Izuku, given that boys could be annoying at times. Shoka acknowledged that while he had his moments, he was generally a good guy and enjoyable to be around. Uraraka noted that it sounded like Shoka really cared for him, to which Shoka confirmed that aside from being a hero, Izuku was the most important person in her life. This sentiment touched the hearts of the girls, who looked at her with admiration. Satisfied for the moment, the girls shifted the conversation to lighter topics, which Shoka appreciated. The discussion turned to clothes and food until Uraraka surprised everyone with a question about Shoka's father, Endeavor. Shoka confirmed this, and while the others were surprised, Melissa was not, as she had already known from Izuku's messages. The conversation continued, with the girls curious about what it was like growing up in the spotlight of having a famous hero as a father. Shoka explained that her dad never pressured her or her brother Toya to follow in his footsteps, instead encouraging their individual potentials. When asked if Endeavor inspired her to become a hero, Shoka clarified that while she respected him, her true inspiration was her mother, the hero known as Snow Angel. The revelation surprised everyone. Shoka shared that her mother was an incredible hero, stylish and highly regarded, but had stepped away from hero work when Toya was born to prioritize her family. When asked why her mother inspired her despite retiring before Shoka was born, Shoka recounted a childhood memory that still affected her deeply. She described a frightening incident when a villain attacked while she was shopping with her mother. Her mother had intervened, freezing the villain in place and fiercely protecting her family. This moment solidified Shoka's desire to become a powerful hero like her mother. The girls were moved by Shoka's story, and as they realized how late it was getting, they bid each other a warm goodbye and headed their separate ways, all wondering what challenges awaited them at UA the next day. The following day, the members of Class 1A arrived at the UA campus, shocked to find the front gate blocked by reporters clamoring for information about All Might. The students were overwhelmed by questions about his teaching, his hero work, and what he was like as a mentor. Uraraka noted that All Might appeared even more muscular in person, while Ida provided a robotic response, stating he was as inspiring as one would expect from the #1 hero. Kaminari and Kirishima played up to the press, enjoying the attention. The situation felt odd until Aizawa and Eri arrived, prompting the press to demand a quote from the scruffy hero. His eyes glowed red as he gave them a fierce glare that made everyone take a step back. He firmly instructed them to leave. One persistent female reporter, undeterred, insisted on knowing how the #1 hero was doing, claiming they just wanted a quote. He firmly refused, warning that if he gave them an inch, they would take a mile, and demanded they leave his students alone, as they had already been distracted enough. The dark-haired man gestured for his students to move toward the front gate. The reporter protested, asserting their right to be there and that the public wanted answers. She charged toward the front gate, ready to confront the shaggy man. A cameraman yelled at her to be careful. Suddenly, a massive wall of steel plates shot up from the ground, forming a protective barrier around the school. The furious reporter narrowly avoided being harmed as she halted in her tracks. This was the UA barrier, a security measure designed to protect students and staff from potential villain attacks. It would deploy immediately if anyone without a student or staff ID attempted to enter the gates. The reporter thought it reckless for the staff to have such a dangerous measure in place, claiming it could have cost her life. Inside, the students of Class 1A gathered for homeroom. Aizawa took his place at the lectern and greeted them. He had received updates on the results of the battle training and looked at Izuku and Bakugo, acknowledging their exemplary performance in battle while reminding them to keep their mission in mind. Both boys nodded in agreement. Aizawa's tone turned serious as he announced they had important business to address. The students began to panic, fearing they might be expelled for any failures. The tension in the room was palpable as Aizawa paused before revealing that they needed to select a class president. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. It was just a normal school activity. Immediately, every student began to express their desire to be president. Aizawa, uninterested in the commotion, wrapped himself in his sleeping bag and settled in for a nap, instructing them to reach a decision before he awoke. In a typical school, the role of class president might involve extra work, but at UA, it signified leadership among heroes, potentially leading to better placements at top agencies after graduation. After several minutes of back and forth, Ida stood up and called for order, suggesting they hold a vote. Kirishima pointed out that everyone would likely vote for themselves, while Azui echoed the sentiment, questioning how they could trust each other since they had just met. Ida argued that if someone received more than one vote, it would indicate they were worthy of leading. Izuku agreed, noting that they wouldn't reach a decision by continuing to argue. Everyone nodded in agreement, and they wrote down their selections. When the votes were counted, it turned out most students had voted for themselves. However, 2 students received multiple votes, Melissa, with 3 votes, and Momo Yaoyorozu, with 2. Melissa was surprised to have garnered the most votes. Most students accepted this outcome, except for Bakugo, who threw a tantrum over receiving only 1 vote and demanded a recount. Several classmates questioned whether he truly believed anyone would vote for him. The lunch bell rang, prompting the group to head to the cafeteria. As Izuku stood up, Shoka approached him, curious about his vote. He explained that he had voted for Melissa, impressed by her effective handling of the battle exercise. Shoka nodded in understanding and revealed she had voted for Yaoyorozu, appreciating her intelligence for a leadership role. Izuku acknowledged her point, wondering why she hadn't voted for herself. Shoka simply stated she was not interested, and Izuku agreed, noting that the extra work would detract from their training. In the lunchroom, the class split into groups. Melissa sat with Ida and Uraraka, discussing the election. Melissa expressed her surprise at receiving the most votes, while Ida confirmed he had voted for her, citing her effective strategy during the combat exercise. Uraraka remarked on Ida's choice, noting he had the appearance of a president with his glasses. Izuku and Shoka collected their lunches, katsudon for him and cold soba for her. They noticed Eri sitting alone at a table. Shoka suggested they join Aizawa for lunch, despite Izuku sensing her concern for Eri. Shoka denied it, though a hint of embarrassment colored her cheeks. She admitted she found Eri nice and liked her. Izuku was pleased to hear this, knowing Shoka had struggled to make friends due to her power and family background. As they approached Aizawa, he looked up, acknowledging them. They asked if they could join her. The following day, classes resumed as usual, with academic courses in the morning followed by hero studies in the afternoon. Aizawa took his place at the lectern, his expression more serious than usual. He announced that they would be going to an off-campus location for hero studies and instructed them to change and meet at the bus stop, holding up a card that read, "Rescue." Once they had exchanged their school uniforms for their hero costumes, they made their way to the bus stop. Ida organized everyone into 2 lines for efficient boarding, but the bus's open layout rendered his plan ineffective, leaving him feeling foolish. The students chatted among themselves about various topics. Then Azui spoke up and asked Melissa a question. She had noticed that Melissa's power was very similar to All Might's and wanted an explanation. All the students turned their attention to the blonde girl, including Izuku, who was curious about the similarities he had observed as well. Melissa's quirk enhanced her speed and power, creating powerful bursts of air pressure, reminiscent of the number 1 hero. Before Melissa could respond, Kirishima interjected, reminding Azui that All Might didn't hurt himself when using his quirk. This seemed to calm most of the group, but Izuku remained unconvinced. He sensed that Melissa was hiding something. He glanced at Bakugo, and though they exchanged no words, they shared an understanding that there was more to their classmate than met the eye. Izuku could have pulled Melissa aside to demand the truth, but he chose not to. He knew her well enough to understand that if she was keeping something from them, it was likely for a good reason. He respected her right to share her story when she felt comfortable. The conversation then shifted to Izuku. One of the students recalled seeing a clip of a hero named Night Sun, who used fire similar to Izuku's quirk, and asked if there was any connection. Izuku looked to his right, where Shoka was seated. She nodded at him and took his hand in a supportive gesture, which made him smile. Izuku revealed that Night Sun was his father, prompting gasps from everyone on the bus. Kirishima stood up, expressing admiration for Izuku's lineage. Ashido, confused, asked who Night Sun was. Izuku explained that Night Sun was a hero who had worked internationally and was almost as popular as All Might, but he hesitated as he recalled the tragic end of his father's story. When Ashido pressed for more information, Izuku solemnly stated that Night Sun had died. A hush fell over the bus. Shoka gently stroked Izuku's back, knowing that discussing his father was difficult for him. Surprisingly, he didn't appear downcast this time. Kirishima apologized for bringing up a painful topic, but Izuku reassured him that it was fine and expressed gratitude for acknowledging his father's legacy. The atmosphere lightened as the rest of the students relaxed. Shoka smiled at Izuku, appreciating how he could still find happiness in the memories of his father. She understood that losing his dad at a young age had been devastating, and it hurt him that so few people remembered Night Sun. The lack of footage of his heroic deeds only added to that pain. However, hearing his classmates recognize what a great hero Hisashi Midoriya was brought Izuku a sense of relief. Aizawa, observing the exchange, noted that the facility was coming into view. He announced their arrival, and everyone exited the bus in an orderly manner, thanks to Ida's leadership. The location was a large dome with well-kept grounds, and a figure in a space suit stood at the entrance. Uraraka jumped for joy, excited to see 13, who had used her quirk, Black Hole, to save countless people from disasters. Ida remarked on Uraraka's admiration for 13, and Izuku nodded in agreement, recognizing her impressive track record as a rescue hero. 13 welcomed the students to the special training center used for rescue training, known as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. The students initially thought the name was reminiscent of Universal Studios Japan. 13 then delivered a speech about the dangers of quirks, reminding the students that many people underestimate their potential for harm due to societal restrictions. She emphasized that her quirk could be lethal if misused. Izuku and Shoka exchanged glances, both aware of the responsibility that came with their offensive quirks. They understood the importance of using their powers carefully to avoid causing harm. As 13 concluded her speech, Aizawa noticed that All Might was absent. He leaned in to ask 13 about the number 1 hero's whereabouts. 13 quietly explained that All Might had overexerted himself saving people that morning and was currently resting but would join them as soon as he could. Aizawa felt a mix of frustration and concern for All Might's reckless nature. He understood that heroism was deeply ingrained in All Might, compelling him to act selflessly even at great personal cost. Aizawa knew he would need to have another discussion with him about this behavior, but for now, his focus was on his students, who represented the future of heroism. Leading the wide-eyed students into the dome, Aizawa revealed that the interior was divided into different zones, each simulating various types of disasters. 13 explained that she had designed the facility to train students on how to respond during emergencies. Suddenly, several dark portals appeared, emanating an unsettling aura. As figures began to emerge from them, Kirishima was the first to react, questioning whether this was part of the exercise. Aizawa quickly ordered everyone to stand back, clarifying that these were not part of the training, they were villains. Silence fell over the group as shock set in. None of the students had anticipated facing actual villains so soon, and one student appeared particularly frightened. Aizawa instructed 13 to ensure the student's safety while he prepared to confront the threat, adjusting his goggles with determination. Aizawa faced his daughter with a serious expression. He explained that a true hero must have more than one strategy. Eri, though concerned, understood that this was her father's responsibility, the very role she was training for. She nodded, knowing she had to trust in his abilities. With determination, Aizawa charged toward the horde of villains below. Using his scarf, he skillfully captured them while delivering precise punches and kicks. His erasure power prevented the villains from retaliating, creating confusion that he exploited to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, 13 led the class back to the main entrance. As they approached the gate, a shadowy figure emerged, declaring that they had come to eliminate the number one hero, All Might. Izuku was taken aback. The idea of anyone being able to defeat All Might seemed impossible. Yet, the villains must have had a plan. In an instant, Bakugo and Kirishima leaped forward to confront the villain, but he evaded their attacks as if he were a wisp of smoke. The villain's voice echoed with malice, stating that his master's scheme could not succeed with so many heroes present. Suddenly, several portals opened, pulling some students into darkness, including Izuku. When the darkness faded, he found himself in a fiery landscape resembling a city engulfed in flames. Smoke and debris obscured his vision. A group of fire-wielding villains attacked him, launching a barrage of fiery projectiles. Izuku activated his power, absorbing the flames with ease, much to the villains' surprise. They attempted a second wave, but he continued to absorb their attacks and advance toward them, delivering rapid punches that incapacitated them swiftly. Once they were down, he used restraint tape from his belt to secure their unconscious forms, placing them aside in the alley. Izuku had prepared for this moment, knowing he would need a way to restrain villains after defeating them. While he appreciated his firepower, he acknowledged that Shoka's ice abilities were more versatile for a hero. Surveying the area, he noticed the thick black smoke lingering in the air. Flying would be unwise, as he could become disoriented and overwhelmed. Staying low was the best option, where the smoke was less dense. He contemplated searching for Shoka and his friends, but decided against it, trusting that she could handle herself. The villains he faced were weak, leading him to question why such low-level threats were involved in an attack on UA, the top hero academy in Japan. They were likely meant as distractions, with only a few truly dangerous opponents among them. 3 figures flashed in his mind: the villain covered in hands, the teleporter, and the massive figure with a bird-like beak. The last one seemed particularly formidable. If he was indeed a counter to All Might, Izuku realized he needed to return to the front gate immediately. Meanwhile, Shoka had successfully frozen a large group of villains who had attempted to overwhelm her. As the last villain charged from the debris, she swiftly encased him in ice, leaving his head free to extract information. She asked him about their plan to defeat All Might. The villain trembled in his icy prison, claiming ignorance about the specifics of their mission. Shoka considered the possibility that he might be lying, but the overall weakness of the villains she had encountered suggested otherwise. They lacked training and combat experience, which gave her hope that her classmates would be safe. Determined to return to the entrance, where the main battle would unfold, Shoka set off with purpose. In another zone, Bakugo and Kirishima faced off against a group of villains. Bakugo unleashed explosions with relentless force, dispatching foes with ease. However, The invasion only fueled his anger. These villains had endangered his friends and disrupted his training opportunities. Kirishima fought alongside him, impressed by Bakugo's incredible reflexes. When a cloaked lizard villain attempted a sneak attack, Bakugo spotted him and neutralized the threat before he could strike. Bakugo, still seething, declared his intention to return to the gate. As he turned to leave, Kirishima stopped him, prompting a fierce glare from Bakugo. How dare this extra try to stop him? Kirishima felt a sense of urgency as he followed Bakugo, who pushed past him with determination. He thought it would be wise to find their classmates first, considering they could be in trouble too. However, Bakugo dismissed the idea, insisting that if Kirishima wanted to waste his time, he could do so alone. Kirishima found Bakugo's attitude harsh but understood his reasoning. Bakugo explained that the large group of villains they had encountered were likely at the same level as the ones they had just defeated. If that were true, their classmates would be fine. The real concern was the mist villain, who possessed teleportation abilities. Eliminating him would end the chaos. Kirishima was impressed by Bakugo's strategic thinking. Typically seen as a rage-fueled powerhouse, Bakugo was showing a level of insight that surprised Kirishima. He recalled Todoroki's words about Bakugo being smarter than he appeared. This revelation made Kirishima grin as he admired Bakugo's confidence in their classmates' abilities, deeming it incredibly manly. As they moved forward, Melissa teleported into the shipwreck zone, nearly drowning upon landing in the large artificial lake filled with villains. Fortunately, Sway, the frog girl, saved her, having already rescued Mineta from the water. Sway used her frog abilities to navigate swiftly, bringing them to the sinking ship in the middle of the zone, one of the disaster simulators created by she gently placed Melissa on the deck, while Mineta received a less gentle treatment after making a lewd comment, as Sway swiftly subdued him with her tongue. Catching her breath, Melissa thanked Sway for her timely rescue, feeling relieved to be safe. Sway, in her usual flat tone, asked what they should do next. Mineta, in a high-pitched voice, suggested hiding and waiting for the professionals to rescue them. The girls exchanged disappointed looks, and Mineta quickly backtracked, expressing his fear of facing real villains. Melissa, wanting to devise a plan, asked them to explain their powers. Sway described her abilities, which included high jumps, fast swimming, a long tongue, and a non-fatal poisonous mucus that merely stung. Melissa acknowledged these useful skills, especially for their current location. Mineta then explained his quirk, which allowed him to detach sticky ball from his head that could stick to anything but himself. The girls were less than impressed. Before Mineta could protest further, they realized they were surrounded by villains. One enemy launched a powerful water attack against the sinking ship, worsening their situation. Panic set in as Mineta began throwing his great ball into the water, but none hit the villains. Surprisingly, the villains hesitated to approach the orbs, which sparked an idea in Melissa's mind. She realized they could use the villains' fear of the unknown to their advantage. Formulating a plan, Melissa instructed Mineta to throw all his orbs into the water after she attacked, while Sway prepared to leap into action. Mineta, horrified, protested against facing the villains, fearing it would be suicidal. However, Melissa stood resolute, recalling the hard work that had brought her to UA and the challenges that lay ahead. Inspired by the words of the flame hero Endeavor, she declared that this was what heroes did and leaped into the air, leaving a dent in the ship's deck. As she soared, the villains looked up, launching attacks in her direction. Yet, Melissa remained calm, raising her fingers to unleash a powerful flick that created a pressure wave in the water below. The water surged, forcing the villains together. Watching in awe, Mineta felt a surge of envy and inspiration. He remembered his own aspirations of becoming a hero, realizing that true heroism was not about being liked, but about being admirable. With renewed determination, he began throwing his great ball into the water with abandon. As the villains collided with the orbs, they became stuck together in a large clump. Sway leaped into action, grabbing both of her classmates and making their escape from the zone. She praised them for their bravery, feeling proud of their teamwork. It seemed they had survived the shipwreck zone. All the key players were now heading toward the front gate, where a challenge unlike any they had faced awaited them. They would need to push themselves to their limits to succeed. Back at the front gate, the remaining students felt helpless as 13 battled the portal villain, who revealed himself to be Kurogiri. Eri, in particular, felt a sense of despair. She considered using her pause ability to stop the villain but found it impossible to approach him. Kurogiri was manipulating 13's black hole power, making it difficult to advance. In that moment, Eri's years of combat training kicked in. She surveyed the battlefield and recognized the dire situation. 13 and Kurogiri were locked in a standoff, but that wouldn't last long. Kurogiri taunted 13, acknowledging her heroic efforts in saving many lives but claiming that her strength lay in rescue, not combat. An ominous glint flashed in his foggy yellow eyes as he challenged her. Suddenly, a portal opened behind 13, tearing her space suit and pulling her into its depths. 13 screamed as she fell to the ground, Kurogiri using his portals to redirect the force of the black hole against her. He then turned his attention toward the other students, demanding to know who would be next. Just then, a powerful explosion erupted nearby, and Kurogiri was tackled from behind. Eri was astonished to see Bakugo and Kirishima back in action. Bakugo pinned the villain down, his misty form now solid. He had a firm grip on a piece of armor around Kurogiri's neck while Kirishima restrained the villain's lower half. Bakugo, with determination, pointed out the flaw in Kurogiri's misty form, revealing that his power only converted parts of his body into mist. This realization allowed them to exploit a weakness. As Kurogiri struggled to break free, Bakugo threatened him with small explosions, warning him not to move. Eri, still in shock, was urged by Bakugo to use her power to heal 13. The urgency of his words snapped her back to reality. She rushed to 13's side and was horrified by the sight of her teacher's injuries. 13's back was severely wounded, but she was still conscious, albeit barely. Uraraka joined Eri, her face pale with horror. Eri took a deep breath, recalling her experiences in emergency rooms with Recovery Girl. She focused on 13's wound, knowing that healing her would deplete most of her power, but there was no time to waste. 13 needed immediate attention. Earlier, Ida had managed to escape the USJ past Kurogiri and was on his way back to the campus for help. However, they couldn't rely on a quick response, and the villains were likely willing to do anything to prove their strength. Every second counted. Eri activated her power, and it enveloped 13. The wounds began to heal, and within moments, 13 was restored, though she fainted from the trauma. Eri checked her pulse, relieved to find it steady. 13 would recover soon, her body just needed time to process the ordeal. Meanwhile, further into the facility, Aizawa was holding his ground against a large group of villains. Off to the side, two figures watched the fight. A skinny, decrepit young man covered in human hands and a hulking figure with black skin and a bird-like beak. They observed the chaos without intervening. Aizawa used his erasure quirk and combat skills to dispatch most of the villains quickly, noting that many of them were poor fighters. He pondered why such low-level threats were present, recalling Kurogiri's mention of a plan to kill All Might. It seemed they believed they had a way to achieve that, likely involving the large bird-like figure. As Aizawa finished off the last of the minor villains, the hand-covered villain stepped forward, grabbing Aizawa's elbow and laughing menacingly. He taunted Aizawa about his hair, revealing that it stood on end whenever his power activated. Aizawa stepped back, feeling the effects of the villain's touch. His arm felt weak, and he realized that his elbow had been severely damaged. The memory of the front gate, rusted to dust, flashed in his mind. This villain was the source of that destruction. The hand villain introduced himself as Shigaraki, declaring that Aizawa was about to die and that he was the one who had won this game. He commanded the hulking figure, Nomu, to crush Aizawa. Nomu advanced, overpowering Aizawa despite his quirk being erased. Aizawa felt his bones snap under the immense pressure. He was in a dire situation, bleeding and unable to fight back. In a moment of horror, Aizawa noticed Melissa, Azui, and Mineta hiding in the shallow end of the indoor lake. A chill ran down his spine as he realized their presence put them in danger. Shigaraki's expression shifted from evil to sinister as he spotted the students. He ordered Nomu to crush them as well. In that instant, Melissa sprang into action. She charged up her right arm with all the energy she could muster from All for One. Quickly closing the distance between herself and Nomu, she delivered a powerful punch to the creature's gut. The blow unleashed waves of air pressure throughout the dome, kicking up a large amount of dust in the process. The blonde girl hoped that would finish off the monster. However, as the smoke and dust cleared, the creature remained standing, seemingly unharmed. Shigaraki laughed, acknowledging her strength. He informed her that Nomu had shock absorption, which rendered her attack ineffective. The creature then grabbed Melissa's outstretched arm and lifted her into the air. Panic surged through her as she struggled to break free, feeling a sense of doom wash over her. She had come so far, only to face defeat at the age of 15. All Might moved through the facility, taking down villains with ease. The students felt a surge of relief and joy at his presence. Soon, other staff members and the principal arrived, marking the end of the League of Villains invasion. Police were called to take the villains into custody, loading them into transports for interrogation. Emergency services arrived to provide medical attention to the injured students, most of whom had only minor wounds. Melissa was taken to see Recovery Girl, while Eri, Mr. Aizawa, 13, Izuku, and Shoka were taken to the hospital for observation. As the students and staff waited outside the USJ, Principal Nizu stood before the members of Class 1A with his head held low. He expressed his regret, acknowledging that the events of the day were a result of their short-sightedness. He promised that they would make necessary changes in the future. A man dressed in a trench coat and matching hat approached the principal, introducing himself as Detective Tsukachi, who would be leading the investigation into the incident. He requested Nizu's full cooperation, to which the principal agreed, assuring the detective that he would have access to conduct a thorough investigation. Uraraka, filled with worry, inquired about their teachers and classmates. The detective reassured her that everyone was doing fine. 13 was being looked after, and although Erasure was in more serious condition, he was stable. He continued, explaining that Eri Aizawa and Shoka Todoroki were recovering from exhaustion, and Melissa Shield had minor injuries. The most serious case was Izuku Midoriya, who remained unconscious and had been taken to the central hospital for closer examination. Uraraka let out a breath of relief but expressed concern for Midoriya, fearing that Todoroki would be upset. Bakugo reassured her that Midoriya would wake up in a few days, explaining that after expelling a massive amount of energy, he needed time to recover. Uraraka felt relieved but quickly shifted her focus to Bakugo's teasing. As the police continued their questioning of students and staff, they took special care with Shigaraki and Kurojiri, ensuring their transport to jail. The principal and UA teachers had their own responsibilities, needing to apologize and explain the situation to the parents of Class 1A. Most parents were relieved that their children were safe and did not hold a grudge. The following day, Nizu held a meeting in his office, attended by All Might, Endeavor, and Toya Todoroki, also known as Icy Hot. Nizu thanked them for coming, acknowledging their busy schedules. He began the meeting by asking about Izuku Midoriya's condition, receiving the reassuring news that he was expected to regain consciousness soon. Nizu expressed relief at the progress of the injured students, particularly those who had been most affected. He felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, knowing that none had suffered fatal consequences. He then addressed the serious matter at hand. The battle with the villains had resulted in a death, specifically that of the giant villain Nomu. The three heroes exchanged concerned glances, eager to hear what the police had determined. Nizu informed them that no charges would be pressed, as Midoriya's actions were deemed self-defense. The Safety Commission decided to attribute the defeat of Nomu to All Might, believing it would present a better image to the public. All Might felt a sense of shame for not arriving sooner, but he accepted the decision, prioritizing Midoriya's well-being over his own reputation. The reports from students and Aizawa regarding Nomu's multiple quirks raised concerns among the heroes. All Might acknowledged that it was unusual, but Endeavor pointed out that individuals with compound quirks were becoming more common, citing examples like his son and Izuku. Toya agreed, suggesting that the villain could have had a quirk that absorbed kinetic energy, enhancing his strength and speed. Nizu nodded, reflecting on the implications of such abilities. Still, there was a lingering doubt about his involvement. The group remained silent, all aware of whom he referred to but hesitant to speak his name. All Might finally broke the silence, expressing hope that it wasn't true. Nizu nodded in agreement, lamenting the loss of the Nomu, which could have provided valuable clues had it survived. There were remains, but their usefulness was uncertain. Nizu shifted the conversation to the leaders of the attack they had captured, informing them that they were being held in custody and awaiting transport to Tartarus. The police were in the midst of interrogating them, but so far, they had yielded no information, though it was still early in the process. Toya, with a firm yet respectful tone, questioned why he and Endeavor had been called off the streets. Nizu explained that he wanted to discuss an important upcoming event. Meanwhile, news of the USJ attack had begun to leak into the United States, though the information was fragmented and incomplete. However, those who were well-connected and intelligent could uncover the truth. A tall man with white hair sat in a beach chair, dressed in a green and gold hero costume. His brown eyes were shadowed by dark circles, giving the impression of a mask. He scrolled through various news reports on his laptop, while a large golden doorway adorned with designs of lions and eagles loomed behind him. Suddenly, a blue emoji appeared on his screen, accompanied by a loud alarm announcing, "It's rad time! It's rad time!" The man sighed in exasperation and addressed the emoji, asking what was happening. The emoji's cheerful expression shifted to a frown, suggesting he should at least play along. The man replied that he was not paid to play games. The emoji acknowledged this but inquired about his students, to which the man responded that they were in training. The emoji then turned its attention to the news articles, noting that the man was investigating the attack on UA. The man remarked that it was hard to miss, although many stories were more sensational than factual. He pointed out that reports claimed students had stopped the attack, which seemed implausible. The emoji insisted that it was true, prompting the man to express his surprise. The screen shifted to display several images, and the man examined them closely. He recognized the photos as being from UA's USJ facility, where rescue operations were trained. Upon further inspection, he noted that the roof of the dome was severely damaged, with signs indicating it had been subjected to extreme heat. The emoji praised his investigative skills, revealing that the Hero Public Safety Commission of Japan attributed the damage to All Might, who had battled a villain and sent him flying through the roof with such force that it melted some supports. While acknowledging All Might's strength, the man pointed out that the damage suggested sustained heat rather than a momentary impact. He speculated that only 2 individuals in Japan could generate such heat, Endeavor and his eldest son, Icy Hot. The emoji's eyes turned to XS, indicating he was incorrect, as both heroes were engaged in other takedowns at the time. Curious, the man asked who was responsible. The emoji revealed that it was UA's Class 1A involved in the attack. The man expressed concern over the involvement of freshman heroes. The emoji encouraged him to look at the class roster, which appeared on the screen. After scanning the names, one stood out, Izuku Midoriya. The man recalled hearing that name before and, after a moment of contemplation, remembered an international hero from Japan with the last name Midoriya. The emoji confirmed this, adding that Hisashi Midoriya, known as Night Sun, was a powerful fire user and a good friend of his. The man speculated whether Izuku Midoriya was responsible for the damage to the dome and the defeat of the villain. The emoji asked if he believed that, to which the man replied it seemed likely. However, he was troubled by the fact that the heat required to vaporize the roof would have harmed anyone nearby, yet only the villain, referred to as Nomu, had perished while all students and other attackers survived. The emoji acknowledged this point and suggested that a young lady, Shoka Todoroki, might have played a role in controlling or redirecting the heat. The man's interest peaked as he recognized her name from the student list. The emoji confirmed she was Endeavor's youngest child and Toya's little sister. The man speculated whether she had used her powers to contain the heat, but the emoji clarified that she possessed ice powers like her mother. This realization clicked for the man, who recalled Ice Angel, a hero who would have been a significant name had she not retired. The emoji confirmed that Shoka Todoroki likely used her ice powers to manage the heat and fire. The man acknowledged that such control would make her one of the most powerful ice users in the world. The emoji expressed agreement, emphasizing the importance of this information. The man inquired about the purpose of bringing this up, to which the emoji explained that if these two were as powerful as suggested, they might pose a challenge for their students. The man understood the headmaster's intentions, recognizing the unorthodox nature of the idea but also the academy's history of success with such approaches. He expressed his agreement and asked about the next steps. The emoji expanded to fill the screen, indicating that plans were already in motion and he would be in contact once details were finalized. The screen then returned to the collection of news articles, which intrigued the man. Such events were precisely why he enjoyed his job, as they kept him engaged. Meanwhile, Izuku Midoriya sat in her son's hospital room, accompanied by Shoka and Todoroki. They watched over Izuku, who was connected to several monitors, his condition stable for the moment. Shoka sat at his bedside, holding his hand tightly, having been unconscious for nearly 3 days. This meant he could wake up at any moment. The doctors had confirmed that he was physically fine, with no broken bones or internal injuries. However, they still could not explain his unconsciousness. No doctor had ever figured out why this had happened. Shoka reached up and brushed Izuku's hair away from his face. He was rather plain-looking, to be honest, but Shoka found his face endearing. It radiated honesty, care, and loyalty. Plus, he had the most wonderful smile that made her giggle inside. Whatever he lacked in looks, he more than compensated for with his character. It also didn't hurt that he was incredibly fit. The concerned girl hoped the blue-haired teen would wake up soon. Moments like this reminded her of how significant Izuku was in her life. He was not only her boyfriend but also one of her best friends. The inability to talk to him, see him smile, or feel his warm embrace was absolute torture. Most people could not see past Shoka's icy exterior, but Todoroki understood her daughter. She could sense the worry radiating from her. Rei walked over and placed her hand gently on Shoka's shoulder, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Shoka managed a small smile in response, acknowledging her mother's words. She knew he would wake up, but a part of her couldn't help but wonder what if he didn't. Dark thoughts crept into her mind. Inko smiled at her daughter. She understood the weight of worry that came with being a woman, especially when it involved the men in their lives, regardless of how capable they might be. Nodded in agreement, recognizing the challenges they faced in ensuring their loved ones remained safe and didn't take unnecessary risks. Shoka felt comforted by their words of encouragement, which eased her troubled mind. Suddenly, Izuku's eyes shot open wide, and he sat bolt upright in the hospital bed, exclaiming about fire. The sudden movement startled the 3 women, but their fear quickly transformed into joy. Inko was the first to speak, assuring Izuku that he was safe. The boy looked around the room, his wild gaze landing on his mother first. He then noticed the hand wrapped around his own and turned to see Shoka beside him. The sight of her brought him back to reality completely. Shoka couldn't contain her excitement and leaped from her chair to envelop Izuku in a warm hug. She joyfully confirmed her identity. Izuku, regaining his composure, asked how long he had been unconscious. Inko informed him that it had been about 3 days. At that moment, a flurry of doctors and nurses rushed into the room, checking on Izuku and asking him several questions. Satisfied with his responses, they completed their assessments and left the room. Izuku then inquired about the gnome. Shoka explained that it was dead, reduced almost completely to ash. According to the principal, only a burned-out husk remained, as it could not regenerate after its head was destroyed. Izuku nodded, reflecting on this information. He wished he had known that sooner, as it could have ended things more quickly and prevented his unconsciousness. He then asked what had happened to the body. Shoka informed him that the police had taken it for examination, though she was unsure what they would find. A troubling thought crossed his mind, and he asked if the police would take action against him. Inko reassured him that the principal had informed them the police were not pressing charges, ruling Nomu's death as self-defense. Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him. He didn't want to spend his teenage years in a prison cell. Still, he knew he would make the same choice again if necessary, though he would approach things differently. Rei observed the two teens in front of her, noticing the way they looked at each other. She suggested to Inko that they check on the release paperwork, and Inko agreed, both women leaving the room with smiles. The two teens exchanged glances, taking in each other's presence. So much had happened during the USJ incident, and neither knew how to express their feelings. After a long pause, Izuku finally spoke the only word that came to mind. Shoka instinctively responded. Another long silence followed, prompting Izuku to say something unexpected. He mentioned a nice kiss, which led Shoka to playfully punch him in the shoulder, her icy demeanor momentarily brightened by a fierce glint in her azure eyes. Izuku winced and asked why she had done that. Shoka explained that she felt embarrassed about their public display of affection. He suggested that a hug would have sufficed, which caused her cheeks to flush. She stammered that she had to ensure he cooled off quickly, as he might have injured someone. Izuku teased her about the kiss, and she playfully denied it, insisting she had done no such thing. He reassured her that he was only joking, rubbing his arm where she had hit him. Shoka puffed out her cheeks in frustration but eventually admitted that she was glad he was awake and that she had been really worried about him. Izuku took her hand, apologizing for the scare he had caused. He promised her that he would always return to her. Warmth spread through Shoka's chest, and she felt a mix of emotions. She wanted to be mad at him for worrying her, but she couldn't. She remembered why she had fallen for him. He aspired to be the greatest hero in the world. While he could be reckless with his own safety, he was always focused on improvement. Izuku let out a sigh, prompting Shoka to express her concern for him. He reassured her that he was fine but admitted that the experience had made him realize how much he still needed to improve. Shoka was curious, and he explained that he needed to learn to use more of his power in a controlled manner. While unleashing a significant amount of energy could be effective, it also caused too much destruction. He acknowledged that if she hadn't been there, others could have been hurt. Shoka was reminded once again of why she had fallen for him. He was always thinking about how to be better and protect those around him. He was likely contemplating new ways to harness and control his power, which was one of his most appealing traits. The girl embraced Izuku, expressing her unwavering belief in him. Izuku smiled back at her, feeling her icy aura enveloping him, which was quite comforting. He appreciated her support. There were still more adventures ahead for Izuku, Shoka, Bakugo, Eri, and Melissa. The upcoming sports festival promised to introduce some new faces, some of which might seem familiar, while others would be entirely original to this storyline. The completion of this first part took longer than anticipated, so a brief pause was necessary to prepare for the next phase. Once the story was ready, it would be shared. Patience was requested as the aim was to make the story as engaging as possible. In the meantime, readers were encouraged to revisit the story from the beginning. If they enjoyed it, they could show their support and stay updated on new chapters. It had been a week since the USJ attack. Principal Nizu had given the Hero Course students a week off to recuperate after the incident. He used this time to make security adjustments to the campus and to prepare for the upcoming event. A significant part of that involved updating the stadiums with new protective measures to ensure the safety of the viewers from the powerful quirks being used. From what he had gathered, the OP Academy students would be capable of executing impressive attacks, similar to Izuku's solar flare attack on Nomu. There was much to do, and Nizu was determined to ensure everything was ready. Despite the workload, everything was progressing smoothly. Today, the hero students would return to hear the big news, and Nizu hoped it would excite them as much as it excited him. At the Midoriya household, Izuku was getting dressed for the day. His mother had purchased new uniforms for him due to his recent growth spurt. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he expected to feel different being taller, but he felt strangely the same. However, he was now an inch taller than Bakugo, which he found amusing and would certainly use to tease him. The issue was that he hadn't changed as a person. He thought he would feel more confident or cool, but nothing had shifted in that regard. He was still the same, just needing longer pants now. He wondered why everyone made such a big deal about height. Deciding to keep these thoughts to himself, He recalled how much trouble Shoka had after her growth spurt. It had been a challenging transition for her, growing 2 feet almost overnight. As a supportive boyfriend, he felt it was best not to belittle her struggle. After all, he didn't want to face any consequences for his words. Now dressed in his new school uniform, Izuku exited his room and headed downstairs. As he approached the front door to put on his shoes, his mother approached him. "Are you ready to get back to school, Izuku?" she asked. He nodded in response. "Yes, Mom." "Do you have everything?" she inquired. "Yes," he assured her. As he opened the door to leave, Inko stopped him. "Izuku," she said softly. He turned to her. "Yes, ma'am? I love you. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "Thanks." "I love you too," he replied, maintaining a calm exterior while feeling a wave of emotion inside. He marveled at how just a few words from her could bring him to the brink of tears. It must have been a special ability that mothers possessed. On his way to the train station, Izuku ran into Bakugo and teased him about being an inch taller now. Bakugo, irritated by the comment, grabbed Izuku by the ear and pulled him toward the station. "That hurts, Kaken," Izuku exclaimed. "I know. Why do you think I'm doing it?" Bakugo replied with his usual intensity. The two friends hopped on the train and soon arrived at UA. As they approached the UA barrier, they expected to find a crowd of reporters, but to their surprise, there were none. Once on campus, Izuku turned to Bakugo with a question. He asked if Bakugo was okay, sensing something was off. Bakugo, with a puzzled expression, responded in his typical loud manner, questioning the absurdity of the question. Izuku clarified that he was merely concerned about any potential side effects from the recent events. Bakugo initially hesitated but decided to share what he had been experiencing. He didn't want Izuku to worry too much about him. "My explosions have gotten stronger," Bakugo admitted. "How so?" Izuku inquired, intrigued. "At first I thought they were weaker, but they're just going off at a faster rate now. They pack more punch, but it's been a challenge to regain control," Bakugo explained. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief, glad to hear it wasn't anything too serious. He wondered about the others and if they were experiencing similar effects. "I don't know about you, Raraka, but Kirishima won't stop talking about how he feels stronger than ever," Bakugo added. Izuku nodded, considering that if Bakugo, Kirishima, and Eri were having side effects, it was likely that Uraraka was too. He made a mental note to check on her before class. Meanwhile, Shoka arrived a few minutes after Izuku and Bakugo. As she made her way to the classroom, she encountered Uraraka. "Good morning, Uraraka," Shoka greeted. Uraraka smiled back. "Good morning, Todoroki. How are you?" "I'm fine," Shoka replied. Uraraka raised an eyebrow, recalling how literal Shoka could be. She reminded herself to be direct and precise in her conversations with her. "Are your injuries better? Any pain or discomfort?" Uraraka asked. Shoka responded coolly, "I only had a few minor cuts and bruises from the USJ. Recovery girl healed me up good as new after I woke up." "That's good. How about Midoriya?" Uraraka's eyes widened with concern. "I went by the hospital to see him, but he had already left. Since I wasn't family, they wouldn't tell me anything." Shoka smiled, reassured by Uraraka's concern for Izuku. Uraraka smiled brightly upon hearing the news about Aizu. He had been unconscious for 3 days, but now he was back to normal. Shoka reflected on this for a moment and acknowledged that it might have been a good idea to inform everyone when he woke up, apologizing for not doing so. The pink-cheeked girl waved her hands dramatically, assuring Shoka that it was all right and that she understood her concern. Shoka expressed her regret for not remembering to notify everyone and promised to be more thoughtful in the future. They exchanged smiles and walked toward the classroom together. As they entered, Bakugo's voice echoed in the room, mentioning that it was normal for Midoriya to faint after a significant attack. Uraraka was curious about the truth of that statement. Shoka confirmed it but added that Midoriya usually tried to avoid overusing his power. Uraraka excitedly exclaimed how incredible the attack had been, comparing it to a volcanic eruption or a solar flare. Suddenly, the classroom door swung open, and everyone gasped at the sight of Mr. Aizawa. He wore his usual black outfit, but his face, arms, and legs were wrapped in bandages and casts, making him look quite different. He greeted the class in his usual flat tone, and Sui responded with relief, noting that it was good to see him okay. Mina Ishido, however, expressed her concern, questioning how he could be considered alright in his current state. Aizawa took his place behind the lectern and stated that his condition was unimportant because their fight was not over. The students' eyes widened at those words, and a sense of anxiety filled the room as they wondered what he meant. After a moment, Aizawa revealed that the UA Sports Festival was approaching, and the atmosphere shifted from shock to excitement. He explained that competitive sports had diminished in popularity due to the emergence of quirks, but the sports festival remained a significant event, broadcast nationwide. It was a rare opportunity for aspiring heroes, and they could not afford to waste it. The students buzzed with enthusiasm, especially Uraraka, who was particularly pumped. Aizawa silenced them with a glare, indicating he was not finished. He informed them that this year's events would be different due to security concerns following the USJ incident. Attendance would be limited, and there would be an increased presence of pro heroes and police to ensure safety. Additionally, he announced that this year's festival would span 2 days. The room erupted in gasps when he mentioned that UA had been challenged to a tournament by OP Academy. Izuku shot up from his desk, recognizing OP Academy as the top hero program in America. Aizawa confirmed this and reminded him to sit down, which he did, his face flushed with excitement. Aizawa elaborated that for decades, UA had been the leader in hero education, but OP Academy had emerged as a formidable challenger, producing some of the most powerful heroes in the US. He mentioned that the current #1 hero in America was a former student of OP Academy. Momo raised her hand and inquired why an overseas program would want to challenge them. Aizawa explained that their headmaster believed this would enhance his students' skills while fostering good relations between their schools. Kirishima asked how the tournament would work, and Aizawa clarified that the sports festival would proceed as usual, but its purpose would be to select 8 competitors from each grade level. These winners would then face off against students from OP Academy, with the final victor earning honor for their school. The students nodded in understanding, though Izuku felt a wave of worry wash over him. While Japan had the most powerful hero in All Might, America boasted a greater number of strong quirk users. He pondered how powerful these students might be, knowing that heroes from the States operated on a different level. Aizawa's next words confirmed Izuku's concerns. He urged the students to train harder than ever to prepare for the challenge, warning them that this year's freshman class at OP was stronger than any before. He reminded them that they would be fighting blind, unaware of their opponent's powers. Imagining intimidating figures with immense strength, several students began to sweat nervously. With those ominous warnings, the day continued as usual, with academic classes in the morning and hero training in the afternoon. The students were informed that hero training would be a free PRD, allowing them to focus on personal growth in preparation for the sports festival and the tournament against OP. At the end of the day, Class 1A gathered in the classroom, ready to leave. Aizawa reminded them to be diligent in their studies and training, and they all promised to do their best. With that, he dismissed them. As the students filed out, Izuku was finishing some notes when he heard Aizawa call his name along with Todoroki's. Bakugo, exiting with Kirishima, wondered what this was about. The 2 elemental students stood before their bandage teacher, curious about his intentions. Aizawa checked in on them, asking if they had any issues recovering from the USJ attack. Shoka's expression remained neutral as she replied that she was fine. Izuku, feeling slightly embarrassed, admitted that he had been out cold for 3 days but was now back to full strength. Aizawa expressed his satisfaction with their recovery. In addition, Aizawa wanted to inform the 2 students about something unique regarding the upcoming OP tournament. Both teens looked perplexed as they listened intently. Aizawa explained that he planned to announce this to their classmates the following day, but he wanted to speak to them first since it directly involved them. Special conditions that involve us, they thought simultaneously. Aizawa continued, stating that Headmaster Colex had requested both of them to be among the final 8 for the tournament. Shoka maintained her cool demeanor, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. Izuku, on the other hand, was taken aback, falling backward in surprise, his expression one of shock. After a moment, he regained his composure and took a deep breath, apologizing for his reaction. He asked why they were chosen for the finals. Aizawa explained that the Safety Commission had covered up their involvement in the USJ attack. As far as the public was concerned, they were merely victims of a villain attack. Both students nodded, recalling Shoka's explanation during their hospital stay. Izuku understood the reasoning behind the cover-up. The situation was already dire, and revealing that an unlicensed first-year student had thwarted a major villain attack could have caused a public outcry. Aizawa revealed that the OP headmaster was astute and had deduced the truth about the USJ events, placing them at the center of it all. Shoka, maintaining her composure, asked if they should be worried. Aizawa met her gaze and reassured her that while Kulex might be unpredictable, he was a good man and teacher who would not jeopardize the futures of young heroes like them. Both students felt relieved to hear that. The more they learned about Kulex, the more intrigued they became. Aizawa continued, explaining that Kulex wanted them in the finals so that his first-year students could face their best. Since Principal Nizu had already agreed, they would not participate in the usual sports festival activities. Aizawa emphasized the importance of being at their best to face the OP students. Shoka inquired about the hero students' capabilities, and Aizawa responded that they were formidable. He explained that while OP was a hero course similar to UA, it had a significant difference. Kulex founded his academy to prepare for the impending singularity. The mention of this concept sent chills down both Shoka and Izuku's spines. They understood that Aizawa referred to the quirk singularity, a theory suggesting that quirks would continue to evolve until they became uncontrollable, a notion that troubled society regarding the future of superhumans. Aizawa pointed out that it was evident quirks were becoming more powerful, using them as examples. Most of the OP students possessed overpowered quirks, and he warned them to be ready, as the competition would not hold back, despite any rules in place. The two students committed to training hard in the days to come, and Aizawa dismissed them. Izuku rubbed his chin thoughtfully, a myriad of thoughts racing through his mind, his expression shifting to one of concern. Shoka, noticing his worry, smiled at him, finding him cute when he was deep in thought. She didn't want his handsome face to remain troubled and asked what was wrong. Izuku mentioned he was considering researching their opponents, believing a little background could be beneficial. Shoka agreed, suggesting he take notes, and reminded him that her mother would be upset if they were late for dinner, as she enjoyed having him over. Izuku expressed his fondness for her mother's cooking, and Shoka playfully called him a charmer. As they exited, they unexpectedly encountered Bakugo, whose eyes glowed with intensity and frustration. Shoka leaned toward Izuku, commenting on Bakugo's menacing expression, worried he might break his teeth from gritting them so hard. Izuku whispered back that Bakugo likely overheard their conversation with Aizawa and was ready to explode. Bakugo then shouted, revealing his anger about their special treatment and how he would not allow them to get ahead of him. He declared that he would defeat everyone until he reached them in the finals, vowing to take them down. With that, he stormed out of the building, leaving Izuku nervously running a hand through his hair, remarking on Bakugo's intense reaction. Shoka, maintaining her composure, noted that it was loud but expected. Izuku then expressed concern about how others might react, and Shoka took a deep breath, uncertain. Just then, Kirishima's voice boomed, assuring them that most would be excited rather than upset. The two teens turned to see him, realizing he had overheard their conversation. Kirishima gave them a thumbs up, stating that while some might feel jealous, most would understand their situation. Both students smiled, feeling a bit guilty about their opportunity, as it seemed to place them above their peers. Kirishima continued, praising their strength during the USJ incident and expressing his feelings of inadequacy compared to their impressive displays of power. He clenched his fist in frustration, clearly affected by the comparison. Izuku approached Kirishima, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, encouraging him not to measure his abilities against theirs. It wasn't a fair comparison. Kirishima felt tears welling in his eyes as he looked at Midoriya. He wanted to know if Midoriya truly meant what he said. Midoriya confirmed that he did. He explained that while Kirishima's power might seem simple, It would be far more effective in close-quarters combat. In such situations, Midoriya's own power could cause more harm than good. An excited grin spread across Kirishima's face as he expressed his gratitude. Midoriya wanted to ask him about any changes he might be experiencing from the orb, but he sensed that now wasn't the right moment. Kirishima left with a smile, a sight that lifted the spirits of his two classmates. Shoka then had an idea. She suggested that it might be better to inform everyone before the next day, allowing them to express their feelings. Midoriya agreed, acknowledging that it could take some time to reach everyone. Shoka pulled her phone from her bag, assuring him it wouldn't take as long as he thought. She quickly typed a straightforward message explaining everything Aizawa had shared with them and the reasons behind it. Midoriya leaned over to read the message, and his eyes widened when he saw the name of the recipient. He questioned whether contacting Mina Ishido was a good idea. Shoka reassured him that it was the quickest way to spread the word. Although Mina had the lowest grades in the class, she was known for her ability to gossip, ensuring that everyone would be informed within the hour. Shoka concluded the message with a request for discretion, believing it would help disseminate the information even faster. After hitting send, the class group chat buzzed with activity as gossip began to circulate. Midoriya trusted Shoka's judgment, though he found the method somewhat unusual. Putting her phone away, Shoka smiled at Midoriya and reminded him that dinner with her family awaited them. She playfully noted that her mother would be upset if they were late. Midoriya agreed, knowing that eating Rei's food cold would be a crime. He reached for Shoka's hand, feeling her cold aura send chills up his arm, while his touch brought warmth to her. They exchanged smiles and walked out of the school together. The next day, Aizawa informed the class that Midoriya and Shoka would be in the finals. He explained the situation and asked for their understanding. Reactions were mixed. Many recognized the pair's strength and were grateful they wouldn't have to face them, while others felt envious. A certain student sulked in the corner, clearly upset, while Bakugo fumed, steam practically rising from his head. The following weeks passed quickly as the Class 1A students trained harder than ever. Midoriya focused on mastering his power output. Although he improved, he still couldn't reach critical levels on command. He also assisted his classmates with their training, offering suggestions based on his observations, which they appreciated as they prepared for the upcoming challenges. As the sports festival approached, nerves began to rise, becoming the main topic of conversation during lunch. Midoriya, Shoka, Eri, Melissa, Kirishima, and Bakugo sat together, all eyes on Midoriya, who wore a peculiar expression that left them puzzled. Melissa leaned toward Shoka, curious about Midoriya's expression. Shoka, slurping her soba noodles, admitted she had no idea what it meant. This surprised both Melissa and Eri. Eri questioned how Shoka, being Midoriya's girlfriend, didn't understand his expressions. Shoka explained that Midoriya often surprised her with new thoughts and ideas. Bakugo, annoyed by the conversation, decided to intervene. He delivered a swift slap to the back of Midoriya's head, leaving a red mark. Midoriya winced in pain and asked why Bakugo had done that. Bakugo bluntly stated that Midoriya's distracted expression was ruining their lunch and demanded to know what was bothering him. Shoka shook her head at Bakugo's approach, thinking she could have gotten the same information from Midoriya more gently. She wondered what Midoriya saw in Bakugo. After rubbing the back of his head, Midoriya spoke up, revealing that it was the other students with powerful quirks that concerned him. Shoka suspected as much and asked what he had discovered about them. Midoriya explained that he had watched their grade-level tournaments and confirmed Aizawa's concerns about their extraordinary abilities. Kirishima leaned in, intrigued, and asked for details. Midoriya recounted the freshman tournament, mentioning a student who could create weapons from darkness and another who could summon snowmen to fight for her. Kirishima was both shocked and amazed by this information. Bakugo, eager to get to the point, asked who had won the tournament, assuming Midoriya had taken notes. Midoriya retrieved a notebook from his backpack, sharing the names and descriptions of the finalists they would face. Each student took turns reading the lined pages, which included sketches of their opponents. Kirishima pondered why the tournament had been held in advance of their sports festival. Bakugo speculated that it was likely due to the Need for permission for such powerful individuals to travel internationally. Melissa agreed, recalling that it had taken weeks for her to receive authorization to attend UA in Japan. If these individuals are that powerful, who knows what strings need to be pulled? The ice teen had one question, wondering where the other 3 names were. Everyone looked at the book again and realized that only 5 names were listed. The blue teen shrugged, suggesting that the last 3 were likely individuals chosen to proceed like Shoka and him. Shoka acknowledged this, noting that it meant they had no idea what those individuals could do. The group fell silent as they contemplated this new information, understanding that the challenges ahead would be even greater than they had initially thought. Eri broke the tension, commenting that they had their work cut out for them. Shoka nodded and turned to her quiet classmate with curiosity, expressing disbelief that Eri was not participating in the sports festival. Bakugo maintained a blank expression, questioning Eri's absence. She frowned, reminding him not to call her by that nickname and explaining that Mr. Aizawa and the principal believed it was unwise for her to participate due to her powers acting unpredictably. Melissa offered Eri a kind and supportive look, asking how she felt about the situation. Eri admitted feeling bad about not being able to join everyone in the sports festival but acknowledged her father's concerns about her dangerous powers. She resolved to work harder to gain control, recalling that she had done it once before and could do it again. Izuku felt a pang of guilt, realizing that if his own powers hadn't acted up, Eri might not have lost control. Yet, he felt encouraged by her determination to pursue her dream of becoming a hero despite the obstacles. Bakugo grunted, suggesting it was probably for the best since Eri wouldn't stand a chance against him anyway. Eri frowned at his comment but chose not to argue. It wasn't worth it, and Bakugo was. Well, Bakugo. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted their discussion, announcing the arrival of Todoroki. No one recognized the voice, and they turned to see a tall boy with olive-toned skin and dark brown hair cut in a severe buzz cut, grinning widely. Shoka recognized him as Yurashi. Todoroki greeted them warmly, and Yurashi, full of energy, lowered his voice slightly but maintained his enthusiasm. He expressed concern for their well-being after hearing about the trouble they had at the USJ, wanting to ensure they were okay. They reassured him that they were fine, with no lasting damage, and appreciated his concern. Izuku felt a mix of emotions, slightly uneasy about Shoka being so friendly with another guy. However, he recalled hearing Yurashi's name before, remembering that Shoka had mentioned him after taking the recommendations test to get into UA. The 16 teens stared each other down, the tension palpable in the air. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, anticipating the next move. No one dared to blink, eager to witness what would unfold. The UA students exchanged nervous glances with the OP students, all wondering what would happen next. The OP students wore bright orange and white gym uniforms, clearly representing their school colors, just as UA did with red, white, and blue. Izuku noticed that none of them had support items, which suggested they felt confident in their abilities. Finally, a short girl with bright purple hair and eyes smiled at them, her voice cheerful and welcoming. She introduced herself, radiating kindness and politeness, which surprised the UA students who had expected a more intimidating presence. A boy with dark brown skin appeared beside her, expressing his disapproval of her cheerful demeanor. He pointed out that they were supposed to be intimidating, and she quickly apologized, looking embarrassed. Another tall boy with blonde hair and gray skin reassured her, suggesting that her actions would speak for themselves. Izuku observed the shorter boy, who had striking candy apple red eyes and a lean, athletic build. He wondered about the boy's background, guessing he might be Latino. The boy, Ed, glanced at the UA girls, noting their beauty but also feeling a bit overwhelmed by the tall one, whom he found a bit cold. As Ed attempted to approach one of the girls, he was interrupted by a taller girl with long blonde hair, who struck him playfully on the back of the head. She maintained a serious expression, warning him to behave. Ed rubbed his head, questioning her harshness, while she explained that his flirtations were not appropriate in this setting. Izuku leaned slightly to his right, noting Shoka's presence. She expressed her concern about the group's dynamics, while the tall, white-haired girl confirmed that the blonde seemed to be the authoritative figure among them. They both noticed the earpieces the OP students wore, which Melissa explained were advanced translation devices, allowing for seamless communication despite language barriers. As the announcer introduced the OP students, they stood taller, revealing a sense of discipline that intrigued Izuku. He wondered if their training included military-style drills, as many heroes in the US often collaborated with their armed forces. The announcer introduced Bianca Snow, the cheerful purple-haired girl, followed by Jim Thomes, a powerful-looking boy with gray skin. Ed Garcia, the energetic short boy, waved enthusiastically to the crowd, while Kyle Stark, a seemingly uninterested boy with an eye patch, stepped forward next. Anna Charles, the expressionless blonde, bowed respectfully, reminding Izuku of her impressive skills from the tournament. Finally, the announcer introduced Peter Johnson, a handsome boy with sea-green eyes, and then mentioned a mysterious figure simply known as Knight, who confidently declared that he had no last name, believing it added to his allure. After the introductions, Shoka led Izuku into the tunnels beneath the stadium. As they walked, Izuku took a moment to gather his emotions, his dark blue eyes reflecting his concern. Shoka felt relieved to see him regain his composure, but the atmosphere remained charged with anticipation for the upcoming competition. It was evident to Shoka that Aiza's mind was racing through every possibility. She understood all too well that his father's death had been a pivotal event in Aiza's life. So much of who he was today stemmed from that moment. Yet, it remained the biggest unanswered question in his life. The details of how his father died, who was responsible, and the circumstances surrounding it were still shrouded in mystery. Aizu had sought information, but the Hero Commission had never revealed the truth, only issuing a lengthy ruling that prevented them from disclosing how one of the greatest heroes on the planet had met his end. This lack of clarity frustrated Shoka deeply. She hated that Aizu had to endure this. Now, they had encountered someone who might hold the answers. The thought of it was overwhelming for Shoka. Perhaps, just perhaps, Aizu could uncover some truth about that dark chapter of his life. Still, she worried that this information might reignite the shadows that had loomed over him for so long. She remembered how he would cry on his birthday when he was younger. He had gradually moved past that, and she didn't want to witness him suffer like that again. As the couple made their way down the tunnel back to the stadium seats, they ran into Bakugo and Kirishima. The blonde was scolding the redhead for something. Bakugo's voice was loud and commanding, demanding Kirishima to focus. The moment they approached, Bakugo's anger shifted to confusion as he noticed Aizu's expression. Concerned, Bakugo asked what was wrong. Aizu took a deep breath and shared what had just transpired with Headmaster Kulex. Bakugo listened intently, his anger transforming into a more inquisitive expression. Once Aizu finished, Bakugo spoke up, noting that Kulex was aware of the new son, suggesting that it was plausible since Aizu's father had worked extensively in the States. Aizu nodded in agreement, recalling that Kulex had still been active as a pro-hero at that time. Bakugo expressed his desire to be present when Aizu confronted the blue-haired man, and Aizu appreciated the support, although he insisted he would be fine. Bakugo's demeanor shifted back to irritation as he clarified that his interest was not about emotional support but rather ensuring that Kulex wasn't trying to deceive Aizu. Shoka sighed in frustration, having anticipated Bakugo's reaction, yet it still surprised her. It was reassuring to know he cared for Aizu as much as she did. Kirishima, having listened to their exchange, looked confused and asked what they were discussing. It dawned on them that they hadn't informed their classmates about Aizu's vision when he gained his powers, which explained Kirishima's bewilderment. Just as Aizu was about to explain, Bakugo interrupted, insisting they shouldn't tell Kirishima. The redhead's expression shifted between hurt and confusion as he pressed for answers. Bakugo warned that revealing the story would only lead to Kirishima becoming overly emotional. Aizu, desperate to include his friend, promised he wouldn't get teary-eyed. Shoka intervened, emphasizing that they needed to share the information to prevent Kirishima's curiosity from distracting him during his match. Bakugo crossed his arms in annoyance but ultimately relented, allowing Aizu to share his vision. Kirishima listened intently, and once Aizu finished, he stared blankly for several moments before his eyes welled with tears, declaring it the manliest story he had ever heard. Bakugo rolled his eyes, having predicted this reaction. After drying his eyes, Kirishima suggested that Izuku consider using New Sun as his hero name. Shoka and Bakugo smiled at the idea, while Kirishima looked puzzled by their reaction. Shoka explained that both she and Bakugo had thought the same thing after hearing Izuku's story, noting how well it suited him as he brought warmth and joy to those around him. Bakugo chimed in, reminding them that Izuku could also incinerate his enemies. Izuku pondered the suggestion, but that thought would have to wait for another time. He then placed a hand on Kirishima's shoulder, encouraging him to give his match everything he had and to showcase the hard work he had put in. Kirishima pumped his fist in agreement, ready to give it his all. With that, Izuku, Shoka, and Bakugo made their way to the stadium box to join the rest of their class, while Kirishima headed to the locker room to prepare. As they walked, Shoka spoke firmly to Izuku, reminding him that Bakugo's advice to Kirishima also applied to him. Izuku looked at her, questioning what she meant. She urged him to stay focused and not get so caught up in learning about his father that he neglected the challenge ahead. Bakugo nodded in agreement, warning Izuku that the opponent, Peter Johnson, had a dangerous aura about him. He sensed that Johnson's performance in the tournament was only a glimpse of his true strength, possibly rivaling Izuku's own. Shoka felt a twinge of annoyance at Bakugo's nickname for her but decided to let it slide. She needed to concentrate as well, especially with the formidable Snow Girl to contend with. The trio arrived at the box, where their classmates were seated in various groups. Momo and Jair were off to one side, while Shoji, Cody, Tokoyami, and Weejoy were together. Mina and Hagakure were engaged in lively conversation, and Siro, Kaminari, and Mineta were whispering, likely up to mischief. Aoyama sat alone, while Melissa, Uraraka, and Azui were focused on the field. Uraraka spotted Izuku and Shoka as they entered and called them over to join her and the others. They smiled and made their way down to the seats, ready for the upcoming matches. Bakugo settled into a seat behind Izuku. Eri was absent, and they assumed she was still assisting Recovery Girl with the injured, just as she had during the sports festival. She still hadn't been cleared to use her powers yet, but she was taking the opportunity to observe Recovery Girl in action. A short while later, the ring had been prepared, and all safety checks had been performed. Midnight stood in the middle of the ring, announcing that it was time for the matches to begin. With a snap of her whip, an energy field appeared in front of the crowd, made of interlocking triangles. Once formed, the field became transparent. Midnight introduced the new Mach 14 Watt tutelage field, designed to protect everyone from the powerful quirks that would be displayed. Mike jumped in on the loudspeaker, assuring the audience that they were well taken care of and encouraging them to sit back and enjoy the show. A large man with a square head and gray rocky skin entered the arena. He formed a chair out of cement next to the ring and took a seat, introducing himself as Cementos, ready to intervene if necessary. With a deep breath, Mike projected his voice, urging everyone to get the party started. The crowd erupted in cheers, eager for the action to unfold. Mike introduced the first combatants, Jim Thomes and Kirishima, who stood opposite each other in the ring. Fire shot into the air from the corners, and Kirishima cracked his knuckles in anticipation, while Jim smiled at the spiky redhead. Jim Thomes possessed the quirk known as Crossguard, which allowed him to create 8 powers of his choosing. He had to wait for the circle mark on his hand to activate before he could create a power, and once made, it couldn't be changed. At that moment, Jim had 3 powers ready. As the crowd quieted down, the two boys approached each other in the center of the ring. Midnight laid out the rules, stating that the match would end when a fighter couldn't move, was knocked out of the ring, or was too injured to continue. Cementos and Midnight would be watching closely and could end the match if either fighter was in danger. With that, she instructed them to return to their corners and prepare. As Kirishima turned to take his spot, Jim wished him good luck and encouraged him not to hold back. Kirishima responded with a thumbs up, indicating he had no intention of doing so. The two boys squared up, each taking a fighting stance and readying themselves for anything. When the match began, Kirishima prepared to defend himself. In an instant, Jim reappeared in front of him, delivering a powerful punch to his face that echoed throughout the stadium. Following up with a blow to Kirishima's gut, the rocky teen was sent flying through the air. Just before he could go out of the ring, he regained his composure, hardened his hand, and grabbed the edge of the ring to stop himself. Kirishima took a moment to catch his breath, wondering if Jim possessed super strength or speed. Jim, rubbing his fist, noted that the hit had hurt. He observed Kirishima's rocky appearance, realizing he had managed to harden his face just in time to avoid being knocked out. Impressed, Jim acknowledged Kirishima's quick thinking. Kirishima, confused, asked if Jim had super strength. Jim smiled confidently, stating that while he was strong, that wasn't his quirk. He had merely been testing Kirishima, who had passed the test. Jim then pointed out that Kirishima's defensive strategy was evident, suggesting he was planning to endure Jim's attacks until he wore him down. Kirishima was taken aback by Jim's insight but recognized the truth in his words. Jim warned him that sticking to that plan would lead to defeat. Holding out his right hand, Jim summoned a large mace, its shiny metal engraved with strange symbols. He charged at Kirishima, swinging the weapon. Kirishima hardened his body just before the blow struck, managing to absorb the impact. Jim unleashed a rapid series of strikes with the mace, each blow resonating across the arena and causing Kirishima to grimace with each hit. Kirishima braced himself against the onslaught, realizing that the attacks were more powerful than he had anticipated. He understood that if he continued to simply endure, he would lose. Mid-swing, Jim paused and leaped back, challenging Kirishima to attack. Kirishima felt frustrated, noting Jim's speed. Jim suggested that Kirishima's issue might be mental. Confused, Kirishima insisted he was focused. Jim stroked his chin thoughtfully, then noticed that his hands were empty, leaving Kirishima puzzled. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over him, growing larger by the second. Kirishima looked up to see a massive metal sphere descending rapidly toward him, panic setting in as he realized it was at least 20 feet across and falling at terminal velocity. The orb impacted the ring right where Kirishima had been standing. It appeared that the teen was finished. Back in the stands, the entire Class 1A was in shock. Uraraka was the first to express her disbelief, exclaiming about the sudden appearance of a giant wrecking ball. Shoka took a moment to think before explaining that the ball was the mace Thomas had been using. Melissa agreed, noting that his power allowed him to manifest the mace and control its size and shape at will. Uraraka remained puzzled, pointing out that the object didn't resemble the weapon he had been wielding. Shoka, her expression calm but her eyes keenly observing the scene, indicated the sphere. She noted the handle on top and suggested that Thomas had thrown the mace while Kirishima was distracted, waiting for it to gain speed before enlarging the mace head. Melissa acknowledged the danger of such an attack, recognizing that it could have endangered both of them, and concluded that he must have the ability to control the mace remotely. Izuku remained silent, reflecting on the impressive abilities of the opposing students they had witnessed during the tournament. He sensed that Jim's attacks were not only powerful but also precise, and he suspected that these were merely the basics of Jim's skills. He stated that it seemed Jim Thomas was trying to assist Kirishima, a sentiment Shoka agreed with, though she questioned his motives. In the ring, Jim stood, observing his massive mace head, which appeared to have crushed his opponent. However, he showed no signs of worry. Just as midnight was about to declare the match, the mace head shifted, revealing Kirishima, his skin a solid mass of stone, with a few cracks but otherwise unharmed. The teen expressed his frustration, indicating that the attack could have been lethal. Jim assured him that he had never been in any danger, to which Kirishima responded skeptically, questioning how Jim could know that. Jim, with a serious demeanor, told him that he was stronger than he realized. Kirishima felt a wave of shame, believing his power to be ordinary and limited to being a shield. Jim shook his head, insisting that Kirishima's power was more valuable than he thought. He encouraged him, suggesting that with his strength, he could be a formidable hero. Kirishima was confused, thinking his ability only made his skin harder with each strike. Jim then pointed out the weight of his mace, leading Kirishima to realize that it felt incredibly heavy when it had fallen on him. Jim explained that while the weapon could change size, its weight remained constant. He praised Kirishima for surviving the impact with minimal injury and for lifting the mace off himself. Kirishima began to understand Jim's intentions and asked why he was helping him. Jim responded that they were both hero students, from different backgrounds but united in their goal to grow stronger. He expressed his desire for a good fight and believed Kirishima could provide. Kirishima beamed with excitement, calling Jim the manliest. Jim acknowledged the compliment and urged him to give it his all. Both boys took their fighting stances, ready to engage with their full strength. Jim charged at Kirishima, raising his mace high as he approached. He brought the weapon down with all his might, but Kirishima quickly hardened his arms to block the strike. The mace collided with a loud clang, echoing throughout the stadium. Kirishima then raised his right hand to defend against a second strike, grabbing the handle of the silver mace with his left hand. He jerked it to the side and retaliated with a powerful punch, landing a solid hit against Jim's ribs that knocked the wind out of him. Jim leapt back several feet to regain his breath, smiling as he acknowledged the intensity of the exchange. He declared that he could now fight without holding back. He charged forward again, and the two engaged in a fierce back and forth, with hits landing and missing in rapid succession. In the stands, Peter Johnson and Anna Charles watched the match unfold. Peter asked Anna for her thoughts, and after a moment of contemplation, she remarked that Jim was holding back. Peter agreed, noting that if Jim had gone all out, the match would have ended quickly. Anna reminded him that Jim needed to consider the tournament and that he was likely the one most capable of reaching the finals. Bianca Snow, their enthusiastic teammate, interjected, suggesting that Jim was more interested in the challenge than simply winning. Peter found her exuberance a bit overwhelming, but Anna engaged with her normally. Bianca emphasized that Jim wanted to push others to be their best, especially those aspiring to be heroes. Anna nodded, acknowledging the logic in Bianca's perspective, but she reminded Peter that he would have to face Izuku Midoriya, who posed a significant challenge. Peter grimaced at the reminder, but Anna reassured him, expressing her belief in his abilities while also acknowledging the difficulty of the competition. Bianca added a serious note, warning that Izuku was the son of Night Sun, and if he was anything like his father, Peter would have his work cut out for him. Peter understood the gravity of the situation. When he shook Izuku Midoriya's hand, he could feel the power radiating from him, like standing next to a blast furnace, yet comforting at the same time. It was an unusual sensation. In the UA box, Class 1A watched intently, mirroring the enthusiasm of their counterparts. They were all cheering for their red-headed classmate, amazed by his performance. Uraraka was the first to voice her admiration. She struck a muscle pose, exclaiming that Kirishima was doing amazing and truly embodied manliness. Izuku observed the exchange quietly for a moment. While he agreed with Uraraka, he sensed something else. Shoka noticed the concern etched on his face and asked what was troubling him. Izuku expressed his thoughts, noting that while Kirishima was performing well, there was something unsettling about his opponent. The speed and force of Jim's attacks were concerning. Shoka nodded in agreement, recalling how Jim could have easily finished Kirishima at the start of the match with a single blow, but it seemed he was holding back, perhaps to help his rival. Izuku wondered if this was part of Jim's strategy. Shoka shook her head, suggesting that Jim appeared to be the type to uplift those around him, reminding her of Izuku himself. Bakugo leaned forward, his gravelly voice cutting through the conversation. He asserted that while Jim was powerful and supportive, it wouldn't matter against him. He was determined to give it his all, and Izuku understood the intensity behind Bakugo's words. Back in the ring, the battle had shifted. Kirishima found himself on the defensive as Jim increased his intensity, swinging with greater power and speed. Concerned that his strength would soon wane, Kirishima felt the impact of each blow through his hardened skin. Realizing he needed to change his approach, Kirishima recalled a conversation with Izuku and Bakugo about being more offensive in combat training. He remembered Izuku's advice that simply taking damage wouldn't save anyone. Bakugo had echoed this sentiment, emphasizing that Kirishima's punches could be devastating if he utilized his quirk effectively. Though Kirishima felt his power was ordinary compared to his friend's flashy abilities, Izuku reassured him that it was not the quirk itself but how one used it that mattered. Encouraged by Izuku's belief in him, Kirishima resolved to apply that advice in his fight. Determined to turn the tide, Kirishima stomped his foot down hard, cracking the concrete beneath him. He focused all his remaining strength into his quirk, feeling his skin harden and take on a more stone-like appearance. Jim, startled by this transformation, instinctively jumped back, wary of what Kirishima was about to unleash. With a fierce determination, Kirishima felt his body crunch and snap as it became more rock-like. He transformed into a formidable figure, resembling a cliff on a beach. Gritting his teeth, he shouted with all his might, declaring himself unbreakable. Jim smiled, recognizing that Kirishima had more to offer. He contemplated changing his tactics but decided against revealing all his abilities so early in the competition. However, he knew he needed to intensify his efforts to avoid losing. In a world where heroes and villains clashed, a young boy named Izuku Midoriya dreamed of becoming a great hero despite being born without a quirk. His determination and unwavering spirit led him to enroll in UA High School, a prestigious academy for aspiring heroes. As he navigated the challenges of training, Midoriya faced fierce competition from his classmates, each with unique abilities. Among them was Katsuki Bakugo, a childhood friend turned rival, whose explosive personality and quirk made him a formidable opponent. Their rivalry fueled Midoriya's growth, pushing him to unlock his true potential. During a training exercise, the students were moved into a simulated battle against a powerful villain. The atmosphere was charged with tension as they strategized and fought valiantly. Midoriya, using his newfound abilities, demonstrated remarkable courage and ingenuity, inspiring his classmates to overcome their fears and work together. As the battle raged on, the stakes grew higher. Midoriya's heart raced as he faced overwhelming odds, but he refused to back down. With each challenge, he learned the importance of teamwork and the strength that comes from believing in oneself and others. In the aftermath of the battle, the students reflected on their experiences, realizing that true heroism was not just about power but also about compassion and perseverance. Midoriya's journey was just beginning, filled with trials and triumphs that would shape him into the hero he aspired to be. With determination in his heart and the support of his friends, Midoriya looked toward the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path of a hero was fraught with obstacles, but he was prepared to rise to the occasion, fueled by his dreams and the bonds he had forged along the way.